Here we go, watch duty. Again, this is the 2-7 fire. Just to orient people where we are on the map, since it wasn't showing when I was zoomed out, this again is pretty close to Murphy's, and this is right along the Highway 4 corridor, so between Angels Camp and Murphy's. This fire, the actual footprint of the fire as measured by the last aircraft is, you can see it's burning in the upslope direction, and it is burning through relatively populated area right now. So this is resulting in some pretty significant evacuations. So all of the areas right to the south of the center part of town in Murphy's, so this whole corridor along Highway 4, evacuation order. The fire is essentially there, and it is spreading rapidly in this direction. So that is a significant problem. And this is one of these situations where I think the fire is getting ahead of firefighters, and so this is one of those situations where it would pay to have your head on a swivel if you're up in Murphy's, which is now, I think the town proper is now under an evacuation warning, not yet an order, but that may well become an order, as areas in this region too, Big Valley, east side of town. I would treat these as at least an evacuation warning now as well. So I think there's a chance under these conditions this could jump Highway 4, and that does potentially put quite a few structures in harm's way. So the challenge here is this is a wind-driven fire. Despite there not being an offshore wind event, there are winds in the area from thunderstorm outflows. I'll show those in a moment. Again, Angels Camp itself not directly threatened right now due to the direction of spread. In fact, I think that's where the evacuation center is set up right now, but a significant risk to Murphy's and the communities thereof. Depending on how big this gets, unfortunately, it has a lot of room to roam, so I don't want to make any assumptions, but this one is pretty concerning, and it represents an immediate threat to dozens, if not hundreds of structures. The most recent update, this is a 500-acre fire. Additional resources being pushed into the Murphy's area for structure protection. 8 hand crews requested additional. That's a significant order. So Highway 4 is closed in this area, so it's probably time to be getting out. There are other fires. There's the 1-2 fire. No update recently, so I don't know if this one is still active. There are other smaller ones, the McCormick fire. There's some isolated smaller starts up in the vicinity where there have been lightning strikes. I'm not sure. Some of these are hard to see because there's now so much ground level smoke from other fires. Here's the 5-2 fire, which had been held by a retardant line earlier, but apparently the most recent update is it's broken through the retardant line, and this is a problem because this is quite close to Sonora. This is just above town in the hills. So let's take a look at the live camera here. Well, that's a little bit of a scary looking picture. I don't think this main plume is actually from the fire near town directly. I think this is from another fire that I'll talk about. Yes, there are a lot of them. I don't think the camera has a view on this fire right now. Let's see if there are any cameras that do. Maybe this one does. Yeah, so let's see here. Honestly, I don't know if that is the 5-2 fire or another fire. I think this is probably a different fire that looks too big to be the 5-2 fire. But in any case, the 5-2 fire previously considered surrounded by retardant, and now it seems that there is a new problem. Okay, so I think that was actually looking towards this pair of fires. So the 6-5 fire, the 6-2 fire. These are two multi-100-acre fires burning on the shores of Don Pedro Reservoir. Get a view of it. Here is the 6-2 fire, obviously very active, as you can see, although it is essentially burning to the lake. So right now the winds are going to push it to the water. This one is going to run out of room. It's going to burn along the lake shore, but that gives it a nice big barrier. This one, though, And there are evacuations order up through and including Chinese camp to the north. So this one, unfortunately, has greater potential to run. There are evacuation orders. In fact, there's apparently it's okay. So this is that fire. This is the fire near that's threatening Chinese camp directly, for which there's evacuation orders. That one is clearly very active. Okay, so we've also got, what else do we have here? There have been other fires in the grasslands lower down. The 2.8 fire is a 500-acre fire. It's still active. They're requesting additional air tankers. That could ultimately go on to threaten the Copper Grove subdivision. The 2.2 fire is actually a fairly large grass fire, 1,400 acres, although evacuation orders have been lifted, so I think they're managing that one a bit better down on the flats in the grassland. There's some other fires. Here's the 2-1, 2-2 fire. Looks like this one is being well managed, so I won't focus too much time on that. There is also in the Central Valley proper, so east of I-5, there's a significant grass fire causing localized evacuations in the Central Valley. It's found a pretty decent pocket of grassland. If I blow this up, though, you can see it's still an active wind-driven fire, especially on this flank, the southern flank, it looks like. So again, there's I-5. You see the traffic. This is a pretty significant grass fire by Central Valley standards. I won't linger too much there because there's not a lot of structures in the way. There's, I think this must be burning in this pocket here, so near the aqueduct, actually. Okay, where else do we have? I was saying earlier that it looked like that they had extinguished all the fires down in San Benito. I think this is down in San Benito County, down by Parkfield Junction, but one of them got away. This is the Salt Fire, which is around 1,000 acres now. Here's the view from the San Benito Mountain camera, and if I play it forward, you can see there's a pretty significant fire, wind-driven, and again, you can see new elevated convection, so thunderstorms developing in the background. So these are developing over the Southern California transverse ranges to the south. All right, what else have we got? The Garnet Fire has been blowing up today quite dramatically. If we look at the Buckrock camera, let's actually go back the full 2 hours for this because it's quite a dramatic camera view. This has been the fire. It's gone through thunderstorm outflows. It created its own thunderstorm earlier. Again, this is a 2-hour loop on the Garnet Fire, which has been burning for days now, sparked by a previous lightning strike. This doesn't look quite so dramatic in this image, but you can see it pop up in between bursts of thunderstorm activity with the large. Let's do the 6-hour view. I think this is probably what we saw earlier in the day. There we go. There's the view earlier today when it generated its own pyrocumulonimbus cloud. In fact, it reached such a fever pitch that it actually started to create its own wind patterns. You can see the wind shifting around, these lenticular clouds developing, the storm develops. There may have even been a little bit of rain on the fire, but as you can see, it clearly didn't extinguish the fire. It may have temporarily cooled down some of the hot spots, but the sun is coming back out and it's perking back up. There are additional fires. Earlier there was the Michigan fire up farther north, the Copper Fire, the 4-1 fire, the 1-1 fire, the South Fire, the Rock Fire, the Valley Fire, the Sierra Fire, the Oregon Fire, and the Flat Fire. All, I believe, started by lightning, and a bunch of unnamed fires. Fortunately, not seeing any lightning fires yet up in this region, but that could change later today as lightning pervades. There is a new fire known as the Cedar Fire. I don't think this was started by lightning unless it's a holdover from a couple of days ago. But this is, unfortunately, another new and aggressively running fire. Let's see. Yeah, that's burning in timber. You can see it's in the trees and it is spreading pretty quickly, and it does look like there's some subdivisions around. This isn't out in the middle of nowhere, so there are evacuation warnings going out, and yeah, you can see the roads in there. There are some, I don't know exactly what town would be out there, but there's some subdivision out along the Highway 36 corridor there. let's see, there's this fire. Forward progress stopped, so that's good on that one, so I won't linger. Evacuation's still out for the Root Fire, the Dillon Fire, the Blue Fire up north, but those are not new today, so I won't focus on them too much. I'm going to go back down to the 2-7 fire because this is the one that is posing some immediate problems. Let's look through some camera views at different fires. This is Don Pedro. I think you can see there a water dropping helicopter picking up water in the lower left of the screen there. I'm not quite sure. I'm guessing that's what that splash is. There's a fire. It's a good opportunity to pick up some water and drop it pretty quickly. This camera view doesn't look like much because it's kind of smoked in. This one is also getting smoked in. This one too, also smoked in and smoked in. So I lined these up earlier. There's the grass fire in the San Joaquin Valley. Here's another view of Don Pedro Reservoir. You can see the aircraft orbiting. That's another just smoky view. This is the San Benito camera. Here is the Garnet Fire. Okay, so I'm going to take a moment to... You're going to see me full screen again. Okay, I did that one right. I'm going to take a look at some questions from folks. All right, so I don't know if Zeke Lunder over at the Lookout is covering the 2-7 yet. It's tricky because these pop up a lot of warning, and that is another point it's worth emphasizing. This was a pretty major dry lightning event that was not especially well advertised in some of the forecasts, including in the Weather Service forecast for the foothills. I'm a little bit surprised that there wasn't more language surrounding the potential for lightning overnight and today in the Sierra foothills and the Central Valley. There were some pretty strong indications. I mean, if you joined for the live stream, I hosted yesterday morning, so about 24 hours before the lightning began. I was talking about this potential, and there was a pretty decent signature. We saw that in the mention of it in the Weather Service Bay Area discussion, by the way, although the odds were slighter there, and so far we haven't seen real lightning in the Bay Area. But there was surprisingly little mention of this in the official forecasts, and again, we have those truncated forecast discussions from Sacramento or the San Joaquin office due to the DOJ staffing cuts. So I don't know anything specific about the situation, but I was surprised not to see thunderstorms in the official forecast from the Weather Service for a lot of the region that received dry lightning now with consequential fire starts, because pattern recognition, we talked about how that's an important piece of the story. And this is something that the Weather Service Bay Area meteorologists mentioned. This is a classic autumn thunderstorm event pattern. When we see this signal, it makes some of us in the business a little nervous, which it did this past weekend looking into today, and now it's happened. Also, the high-resolution models did a pretty good job with this. WRF and the high-resolution rapid refresh, or the HER model, explicitly showed a bunch of lightning over the Central Valley and the foothills last night, which is what happened. So I won't go through that too much because there's a lot going on. I want to show some other imagery now. Please do feel free to add questions, comments. I'm going to go through other events and show some more weather data right now. Okay, now I'm just trying to make sure that I don't bore everybody with email. All right, so here's the satellite imagery now. This is current up to the moment satellite imagery. So what's interesting is that right now, across a lot of the region, the skies have cleared out a lot relative to earlier. But there are a few features of interest. One is, if you notice this little line of clouds right down the Central Valley like this, it's kind of subtle, but you can see a couple of elevated showers and thunderstorms popping up off of this line. So far, these haven't generated too much lightning, but these ones might as they head northward further. But just keep this line in mind. I'm going to show some radar imagery, but there's something unusual going on. The other thing that's interesting, notice this little eddy off the coast, a little cyclonic spin of the marine layer. It's actually inducing flow along the coast that is south to north, which is going to do the opposite of induce upwelling. So we're actually going to see under the marine layer a big spike in near-surface ocean temperature in this region, even though there's some fog right now. Normally we have northwesterly winds, which induce water motion like that and upwelling from beneath, but now we've got the opposite. I'll show you why that is in a moment. The remnants of this morning's elevated convection are lifting northward. They're not very consequential right now. It's sunny up by Shasta and Redding. That's going to change soon, though, because there's this huge batch of severe thunderstorms over the Sierra Nevada right now. These are wet storms. These are not dry thunderstorms. These are producing heavy downpours. There's even a slight chance of some flash flooding in this region right along here. Now, unfortunately, that's the flash flood risk region that almost completely non-overlapping with the ongoing wildfire threat region, which I would essentially characterize as roughly here. So wet storms in this region, flash flooding, severe storms, blah, blah, blah. Drier storms in this region, which is a pretty good chunk of northern and central California. I do think that the Bay Area and Monterey Bay areas are probably going to be spared from this. There's a very slight chance, but I think we're looking okay there at this point. But elsewhere, we may not be done yet, and there is at least some lightning potential essentially everywhere east of about that curve right now. And the reason for that is what we've got offshore. If we look at the mid-level water vapor, I'm going to zoom out a little bit more. It's the giant or not so giant yellow orb. We have a fairly modest mid-level low pressure system off the coast. It's really not that deep, it's not that strong, but boy was it enough to produce a bunch of lightning in that elevated convective band in the overnight into early morning hours. So now we've got this low pressure system. It's literally going to move, it looks like, directly over San Francisco in the next hour or two. And again, there's no clouds associated with the low itself. It's completely clear skies. But it's what's going on the eastern flank of this low. There's uplift in the atmosphere in this region here. So you have upward moving air in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, and you can see these thunderstorms exploding. So it's not the low itself. The low is, if you're in the middle of the low pressure system, you don't really have much uplift right now. But it's on the eastern flank of it, where there's also enough moisture and instability for thunderstorms. And look at what we see. We're actually seeing some convection pop up again on the transverse ranges. We're seeing convection again popping up a little bit in the Central Valley. So this whole region, as we go into the evening hour, we could see a redevelopment of thunderstorms, which on the western flank will be drier, and the further east we go, I know it's counterintuitive, but the closer to the desert you are, the moister the air. Southern California, the coast of Southern California, not getting as much thunderstorm activity today as we might have believed earlier, so I'm not going to focus too much on that. This really is a Northern California concern right now. And I'll bring back the visible satellite imagery and again show you what this looks like. The center of the low does not have any clouds. This is just coastal marine layer stuff, but it's to the east of the low where there's interesting things going on. Bring up the weather radar, Sacramento weather radar. There's a whole heck of a lot of weird stuff going on here. So let's break it down. First of all, we have what has been a severe thunderstorm up here. I think this has I don't know why it's not showing up right now, but I'm pretty sure this is warned for fairly large hail and strong winds. So there has been at least a severe thunderstorm warning just east of Grass Valley, northeast of Grass Valley, and that's continuing to flank the Sierra Nevada here. You can see those isolated valley thunderstorms I was talking about that are trying to pop up along that elevated boundary. Well, those are these. I'm not seeing any cloud to ground strikes yet, but I expect with this we're going to see some lightning strikes just east of Chico and could see some lightning, some fire starts in this region imminently. Additional showers, thunderstorms over South Lake Tahoe. Not much fire risk there because there's nice heavy downpours, although there could be some flood risk. However, what we are seeing is, man, oh man, look at this, and I'm going to zoom in because there is some crazy stuff going on right now. So this arc, whoops, let me get the drawing, excuse me, let me get the drawing tool going. This arc is a strong outflow boundary. So these are strong downslope winds from thunderstorms. We saw these earlier in the valley and they created some wind damage. This could potentially cause a problem. It could knock down branches, make driving difficult, but my big concern is what's going to happen when this hits the fires. Because what we've got, this is one of the fires south of Angels Camp. It's so strong, it's putting up a radar signature right now. So this outflow boundary is a little bit farther to the north, but these storms are also going to produce their own outflow boundary that's going to propagate in this direction toward the fire. So in the next 1 to 2 hours, there's a major risk of a dramatic wind shift that could cause big problems. Here's another fire putting up a radar signature. That's not good to see it. But the other thing we have going on, look at this. The sea breeze is actually, you can kind of see it radiating outward. This is the Melta sea breeze, the hot sea breeze, the hot humid sea breeze in this case, that we sometimes see. So this is a particularly strong iteration of it, although not as unusual as these other features. But what else do we have? We also have these weird streaks, if you sort of notice, of wind flow like this. So what we've got is, frankly, some unusual weather conditions where there are actual convergence boundaries. So you have moisture that is, and we have essentially winds converging in this direction to here, and this direction to here, and this direction to here. So X marks the spot in the middle. I wouldn't be too surprised if we saw some thunderstorms pop up here. It's unusual. These are surface boundaries, but there's enough instability in place that these converging boundaries could pop some new storms. I mean, this is a very strong thunderstorm. Oh, there you go. There's the severe thunderstorm warning was just reissued up here. So this is kind of a mess of a map. And yeah, so if we look down, here are the two separate fires. Here's the one just south of Murphy's, and then here's the one just south of Chinese Camp. Both places are imminently threatened and under evacuation. I'll return to that in a minute. But this is quite some feature. I mean, this is one of the stranger radar presentations I think I've seen here. What a chaotic mess. And again, those storms are now exploding on the eastern side of the northern Sacramento Valley. What happens if we go to Beale Air Force Base radar, get a slightly better look at these storms? Again, they're elevated, so you're not going to get the best view from a ground-based radar. All right, what happens if we go to San Joaquin Valley down the south? So that isolated storm now, here's another fire, by the way. This is that fire in the San Benito. I think it's barely, no, it looks like it's actually not quite in San, but it's on the other side of the county line. Anyway, but there's the wildfire plume between Coalinga and I-5. So that's a significant wildfire plume as well. Here's another wildfire plume. That's, actually I take that back. That was just a thunderstorm. But that isolated storm I mentioned down the transverse ranges now has a severe thunderstorm warning and a flash flood warning associated with it. So probably not too many new fires with this, but just an indication that things are pretty wild times in California at the moment. Okay, so let me go back to, I'm going to do a satellite view of fires. Again, you can see, all right, so let me bring up the shortwave infrared, which will be a better indicator of the fire activity. Yes, okay. So here's what you're seeing. This is the Garnet fire. It's huge, it's angry. But here, let me make that stick around. That's the Garnet fire. But these are the fires near Murphy and Chinese Camp. So these are the fires of concern, especially in the southern Sierra Nevada foothills. There's another, this is the grass fire in the valley right now. There's a number of fires, but this region right here, there's a bunch of smaller fires that aren't showing up as well. If we go up to the northernmost part of California, we also see thermal signatures starting to pop up on multiple fires up here. I count 1, 2, 3, 4 for now. So there is a lot going on. If I briefly zoom out, because we also, remember, have a record-shattering heat event and wildfire event up in Western Canada and the Pacific Northwest right now. Oh boy, that is an ugly, ugly map when it comes to fires. Let me just zoom in briefly on Oregon, Washington. Look at all those major forest fires going. You can see them. Washington, eastern, western, even the Olympic Peninsula up into British Columbia. If I go to shortwave, yikes. What you see are, I'm just going to count the fires. One, I mean, these are all fires large enough to show up easily on a satellite map, and just to give you a sense of how many there are right now, and this is just on one particular satellite view. This is not, this is very different from how it looked a couple of weeks ago. We go up into the interior of BC, by the way. We have some big time fires burning here as well. Again, this is not typical for this late in the year, this far north. And if we go even farther north, well, maybe I'll keep it closer to home for now. Let's just keep it closer to California, given what's going on. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is quickly check the comments, and then I'm going to go back to watch duty. Okay, so looking at comments now. Alright, well, there's some informal reports here that there's structures potentially burning in Chinese camp from the 6.5 fire. I'm going to check that out in a minute. Unfortunately, there is a fairly high potential for some structure loss with these fires right now. Under these conditions, they're moving pretty fast. There's a lot of them, and there aren't a lot of resources available in terms of air resources or ground resources at this point. They're kind of saturated. Well, I wish there was a more literal saturation of water. Yeah, by the way, as Timothy mentions, the fire is not in Coalinga, by the way, but Coalinga is in Fresno County, so I think the fire might technically be in far western Fresno County, but up in the hills. Jonathan asks, and the Trinity Alps should be concerned for development in the coming hours? Very possibly. All right, there's a few comments about Chinese camp, so I'm going to zoom in and focus on this right now. So that's this fire. Unfortunately, the most recent CAL FIRE update does. Now again, the assessment maps do not necessarily mean that a fire has burned structures, but according to the most recent aircraft mapping update, the fire does unfortunately appear to have moved into the town. It's a small town, if you've ever been up in the foothills, Chinese camp. Let's try and get a little more information here. This is a different fire, so 6.5 fire, watch duty were telling us. So they're expanding the evacuation. It now includes all of Chinese camp up toward Yosemite Junction. Again, that's essentially just a couple of structures along the Highway 108 up toward Montezuma Road, Montezuma. Okay, this does appear to be official confirmation that there are structures burning in Chinese camp as a result of the 6.5 fire. Again, this is a fire started by lightning. It ignited near the shore of Don Pedro Reservoir and unfortunately has made it all the way. It's about 3,000 acres and rapidly growing. It is now burning through the small town of Chinese camp. Obviously, if you're there, you should be long gone at this point, and there are a number of permanent residents there. It's a small town, but there are a few dozen structures immediately at risk. I don't know what this facility is. This is a logging facility. So hopefully the fire does not reach these enormous piles of timber. I believe that's what this is. Yep, I've driven past that before, I remember. So yeah, so longer, not immediately at risk, but potentially down the line, depending how things go. I would keep, if you're up by Jamestown along 49, I would keep an eye on this tonight, because this is, if you just extrapolate twice the distance this fire has already moved in the same direction, we're getting pretty close to Jamestown. Not a prediction, but it's be on the lookout. This one probably is trying to thread the gap between Don Pedro and New Melones Reservoir. I don't know what's going on with this 5-2 fire. Let's just see if we can get a camera view. There's just too much smoke. It's difficult to tell. Again, the other fire of concern, this is another significantly concerning one, is the 2-7 fire. This is up by Murphy's. This is an older fire footprint. The last update was an hour ago. Let's see if we can get a camera view as to what's going on here. This might give us a view. That's just getting smoked out. This is the problem. So this camera is looking directly toward the fire. So the head of the fire is aimed right at the camera, and you can see it's obviously still active. It's a little hard to tell what's going on. Other than that, it's still active. All right, let's take a look at which fires have been updated. We're zooming out a little bit. There is an evacuation center, by the way, for the 6-5 fire in Sonora. And so the Sonora Community Center, Watch Duty is a good resource for that kind of information as well. But right now, Chinese camp being directly impacted by this fire right now. Just checking a couple other sources of notes here. Oh, sorry, I'm realizing that I did not toggle over to Watch Duty here. Sorry, it's been a very long day. Okay, so you're seeing this again. Now you should be seeing it. Again, the 6-5 fire, Chinese camp officially under threat here. And there is some informal confirmation that some structures are being affected. There are expanding evacuations here. And then again, to look at the footprint, just in case it wasn't on screen, here is the 2-7 fire. For orientation purposes, Murphy's is up here. This is Highway 4. But I'm just trying to get a sense of what else is updating. Here's the 6-5 fire just updated. That's the evacuation center update. The 5-2 fire, that's not the most recent update. Let me refresh the page and see if that helps. Okay, update to the Cedar fire. This is another one I haven't even talked about. For perspective, the Cedar fire, this one's a little more remote. This is going to be harder to manage. There are structures nearby, so near Cedar Ridge. If I look at the last 15 minutes for the Cedar fire, obviously it's windy. You can see the trees blowing, you can see the aircraft flying, but this is obviously still an active fire. So this is the problem with resource competition, is you can't throw all maximum resources at everything all at once. You have to pick and choose, and right now there are two fires that are life-threatening and community-threatening, which is the 6-5 fire, again, down by Chinese camp and Montezuma, and then also the 2-7 fire, which is getting close to Murphy's. This is an old fire footprint. I don't know. The fire has likely progressed farther in this general direction. The Ironstone Amphitheater, there are structures in the way. I do not know whether any structures have been impacted yet. I'm just going to do a rotation through the camera views. Again, that's Don Pedro. This is smoke out, smoke out. There's a whole lot of places that are pretty smoked out right now. You can see these elevated convection clouds trying to build back in on some of these. This is the grass fire in the Central Valley that's dying down. I think I'm going to close that camera. Here's another view of the other fire at Don Pedro. again, look at those altocumulus clouds, those altocumulus castellanus clouds. Those are always indicative of mid-level moisture and instability, which is still present. All these views giving a similar picture here. Let's take a look at radar. I paused that. Let me do a quick settings change. I had 36 frames to show the long view, but maybe let's just go to 18 for the shorter run. Okay. So there's that severe storm. Is this updating? Yes, it's updating. So this severe storm is going to affect LaPorte pretty soon. There could be some, at least there's rain with this one, probably some hail. But again, the big concern right now is this gusty outflow wind that you see in this boundary right here. That's probably going to affect fires, and there could be something interesting that happens near the collision of those boundaries, as I mentioned earlier. We have that elevated convection in the North Valley that's still doesn't look like it's producing cloud-to-ground lightning strikes, but it could at any moment. Here is what the fires down by Jamestown, Chinese Camp, Murphy's are looking like on radar. Again, the one near Chinese Camp is putting out a big signature, as is the one. The one near Murphy's is not putting up as big of a signature, although it's hard to tell because it's wind-driven. It really is the fire down by Chinese Camp that's the big concern right now. But again, I am expecting that there, so you can kind of see if you're in the vicinity or if you're communication with fire crews, there's a couple things going on that are concerning. You see this boundary here, this is moving eastward. This is going to hit the fire zone in the next half an hour. Both of these fires, or really all of the fires along. So there's going to be a shift to winds coming from the west. So this is going to start to potentially push fires more upslope and toward communities. That's not ideal. But there might be a competing wind shift. I don't see it yet, but there could be an outflow boundary that comes out from these storms and is even stronger, pushing in the other direction. That could result in some turbulent eddies and some unwanted vorticity in the atmosphere. So I won't speculate further for now, but that could be kind of a problem in the next hour or two, since I don't think the rain from these storms is going to make it very far west, but the winds probably will. I mean, already have these really erratic converging sea breeze, melta, delta breeze, outflow boundary chaos going on up here. I'll once again go check on Beale Air Force Base radar, see if there's any lightning up in the North Valley yet. Still not actually seeing cloud-to-ground strikes, which is good because that at least delays the time it's going to take for any new fires to pop up. Go back to the Sacramento radar as the base because this is just kind of a wild picture again. Okay. I'm going to bring my face back up and hopefully next time I'll remember to turn it off when I want to go back to the imagery. Okay, so comment that Chinese Camp is in big trouble. Unfortunately, that appears to be accurate based on what we're seeing. Comment from question, why do clusters of dry storms in the valley tend to happen in the early morning? That is a really good question because it's the opposite from what you would typically expect. You'd expect in the traditional model, the afternoon and early evening thunderstorms when the sun has heated the earth for most of the day, and you get the most instability in the late afternoon hours as those thermals rise higher and higher in a conditionally unstable atmosphere. They bust through the stable layer, and you get sustained moist deep convection would be the term. But in this case, what happened last night and what is ongoing in many regions now, it's elevated convection. So these are not thunderstorms that develop from updrafts from the surface that keep getting taller and taller until they start to convect. These are actually beginning well above the surface. So the updrafts here are starting about a third of the way up in the atmosphere and then rising through another third of the atmosphere. So these are not updrafts that are starting right above your head and going up to 30,000 feet. These are updrafts that are starting at 10,000 feet and going up to 20 or 25,000 feet. So they're low-topped thunderstorms. The reason why that matters is you're no longer reliant on the daytime heating in the boundary layer of the atmosphere, those thermals, to generate those thunderstorms. And so you don't end up having the same dependence on the diurnal cycle of the daytime heating. Something else that appears to occur is that sometimes at night you actually, because you lose the sun's energy, you tend to cool the atmosphere. It cools off at night relative to the daytime under normal conditions, right? But sometimes the higher level of the atmosphere will cool faster than the lower level of the atmosphere. So you actually destabilize the middle levels of the atmosphere because the nighttime cooling occurs faster at upper altitudes in these scenarios. So you actually have this condition where nighttime cooling, so essentially, if a strong decrease in temperature with height, so a high lapse rate is what it's called. The lapse rate is the rate at which temperature decreases with height. In a more unstable atmosphere, you have a high or a strong lapse rate where temperature decreases more quickly with height. There's two ways to accomplish this, right? You can heat the bottom, keep the top the same temperature. If you make the bottom warmer and the top stays the same, well, the slope of temperature to get to the top there gets steeper. Or you could keep the surface temperature about the same, and you could cool the upper levels. So the rate at which your temperature decreases with height still becomes larger. So you can cool the upper atmosphere or warm the surface. In a big severe thunderstorm outbreak, by the way, in the Midwest, usually you do both. You warm the surface and you cool the upper atmosphere. In California, it's a lot to ask to get both, but sometimes in the summer with these elevated nocturnal convection events, what's actually happening is the top of the atmosphere is cooling faster than the surface. So it's not so much the surface is getting hot and sticky and humid, although it is today. At night, it's that the upper levels are cooling faster, and that destabilizes things in the mid-level just enough to get those thunderstorms. That's why you often see mid-level elevated convection at night in these regions more often than in the daytime. It's not exclusively true, but that's an interesting observation that is rooted in some interesting kind of California-specific meteorology. Question, are these storms heading into southwest Oregon? Somewhat, well, probably not so much southwest Oregon. There's a slight chance, but central and eastern Oregon and Washington could see some problems. Yeah, Bill, so earlier I mentioned that on satellite imagery it looked like a lumber mill, and this seems to be confirmation. That is the SPI lumber mill. I know I've been in the area and I've seen it off the highway and assume that's what it was, and that is indeed a lumber mill. So I know all the lumber mills, they have fire plans in place, but unfortunately under hot, dry conditions with a wind-driven fire with limited resources, that could be a problem. And if that were to go, it's essentially what you have is effectively huge stacks of kiln-dried timber. So they're very flammable if they can get sustained. I know they usually have sprinkler systems that they can put out on top, and so that's probably already going, but we'll see. Fingers crossed about that one. Otherwise, it's going to be a huge source of embers and going to occupy a lot of firefighting resources. Yeah, there's a comment that the salt fire, it looks like it blew across the containment line, which is why earlier it looked like it might have been better contained than it currently is. Let me just adjust my lighting as it's gotten a little bit washed out as the tone changes with the evening. And the sun is setting earlier, although right now I guess that's clouds outside. There's a question from Nancy. What's going on around Rio Vista? I'm guessing this was the big bright reflectivity on the radar near Rio Vista, if I'm right. And as Bill points out at the end of the comments, those are windmills. That's the radar beam reflecting off of the wind farm in the delta. So that's not a storm. That's it's a side effect of having tall windmills that are close to ground radar sites. Okay, I'm going to start sharing my screen again because we do have a significant wildfire episode going on here. Okay. I will double check that I've got the right stuff here, but okay, so latest official, let's see what's going on. This is it looks like there's a fire in the Delta, but I'm not going to worry too much about that one. The McCormick fire, it's still skunking around. It's 2 acres, but it's not out, so that could potentially become a problem later. Let's check on these more threatening fires here. This is a 5-2 fire. Okay, that one's looks like it's managed again after breaking through containment earlier. Cedar fire, again, still burning, not immediately threatening. Okay, the 6-5 fire, this is the big problematic one. It's over 3,000 acres probably at this point. No new updates from watch duty. Let's see if we can get any. And this is the other fire. That's the 6-2 fire. It gets a little bit confusing when they're all numerically named. Might be a slightly better view of this one now. Let's see. I mean, it's still kind of smoked in. So, I think there's some birds flying by. Alright, so see if there's an update on the salt fire. So the salt fire, yeah, so this is that comment from earlier. It has blown across the northern containment line. This is now a 1,500 acre fire with a spot fire that's well established across the containment. I'm guessing this is probably the line that it jumped. It's just a fire road, so it probably wasn't that hard to jump it, but this one will likely be manageable. It could get fairly large, but it's mainly burning in grass and brush, so, and it's not near any people. There's a long ways to go before it gets to like Parkfield. That's not even really Parkfield, it's Parkfield Junction, where there aren't too many people, or Coalinga, which has some irrigated fields in between, so I won't focus too much on that one right now. Just checking on Southern California, making sure there's nothing particularly significant there. There's a fire down here, the Stone Fire, and then the Foothill Fire. Both of these are not super significant, so I won't worry about them. A couple of fires in the valley, but I don't think any of these are related to lightning, and none of them look particularly threatening at the moment. 2-7 fire update. Looks like there's an update in the shelter location. Let's take another look at the imagery to see what's going on. Again, it is still kind of a mess. It's hard to know whether we're going to see any more thunderstorms pop up in this region, but it is possible. There are the altocumulus clouds. There is enough moisture and instability. There is that offshore low coming in, bringing that flow in the right direction here. So that could potentially happen here. If we go to shortwave to actually look at the fire intensity, let me go a little bit farther north here. Yeah, so this really is the concern. This is the fire that's threatening. So essentially, here's the Garnet fire. And then here, I'm going to draw a wide circle around him. Here's the cluster of fires of greatest concern. This one is the one threatening Chinese camp, and unfortunately it sounds like part of the town is burning. This one, I don't even know exactly which this one is. This is the one that's potentially threatening Murphy's. It's a little hard to tell if the intensity on this one has decreased, or if there's so much smoke that the satellite isn't getting a clear view. But obviously the fire, the southernmost fire by Chinese camp is continuing to become larger and has a very strong thermal signature at the moment. Let's actually go back over to the visible satellite imagery. Yeah, so unfortunately, I think that the northern fire looking less bad may just be because there's a very dense smoke plume on top of it from the other fire, so I don't think the satellite can see things correctly. At this point, you can see that really well-defined boundary in the valley. Anything along or east of that could still see some elevated thunderstorm activity. We're starting to see this fill in. So look look at this sort of, it was all clear and now we're starting to see more fill in. So pretty volatile firefight going on right now in those regions. Let's check radar again. As I mentioned, I kind of want to stay online just until I see what actually happens with these converging boundaries. Possibly nothing in this region, but also just it's been a bit of a day, and every other time boundaries have collided, things have done dramatic things in the atmosphere. So let's keep an eye on that. And now we have lightning. All of a sudden, on eastern Sacramento Valley, these storms are now producing lightning near just west of Oroville. So between Chico and Oroville, there is now lightning. This is in the valley, could spark a couple of grass fires, but once these start to move up in the foothills, of course, we all know what the vegetation, the landscape is like up by Paradise. That's where this lightning is headed. So we might start to see some new lightning fires in this region soon. Complicated, again, by this severe thunderstorm is decaying. Do you see this severe outflow boundary that it's producing? Here's the problem. I think this storm will likely fall apart enough to stop generating rain, or mostly. If there are any lightning fires in this vicinity in the next 20 or 30 minutes, they're going to get hit almost immediately by this strong outflow. That's a pretty dicey scenario, so we're just going to have to watch that. Let's go up to Beale then. Here's a better look. These storms may not be completely dry, by the way. There probably is at least a brief shower or downpour over a very narrow region, but you can already see there's lightning strikes occurring outside of the rain core. And what we've seen earlier today is these storms will initially produce a shower, and then the rain will all kind of evaporate as the storm weakens, but it continues to produce lightning in the upwind direction. So let's keep an eye on that. But these are officially thunderstorms now over the central Sacramento Valley, eastern side of the valley between Chico and Oroville, moving north. So I'm going to go back to the Sacramento radar because it gives us a better view of the other stuff, and there is so much going on right now. Man, that is quite the picture. All right, if we go back to, I'm going to zoom out to try to see what updates there might be. So are there fires? I don't know. There is a fire in Oroville. I think this is Oroville. Chico, sorry. I don't know if that's light. I don't think that's lightning related at this point. It's in town or just outside of town. Well, what I'll be looking for, though, next are any ignitions in this region. This is going to be sort of the next region of interest here for the reasons just mentioned. All right, there was a 6.5 fire update. Mandatory evacuations. This is a major upgrade. So mandatory evacuations for the 6.5 fire in Tuolumne County. All roads east of Highway 108 from Junction 59, Lagrange Road. So where is that on a map? All right, so we're roads east of 108. So this is 108. Sorry, I think 49 and 108 merge, right? Yes. Okay, so let me draw this. Let me make sure I'm getting this right. So this is from all roads east. Let's see here. So this is Lagrange. This is the Junction 59. So that's okay. So east of this point here on the map near Keystone, to Highway 49. So 49, I believe, is. Apologies, I have to think a little bit. This is 49, but I don't remember. Okay, so here. So okay, I guess that's already. It looks like that area is already under evacuation on this map. So I'm not sure if this is a new order or if this is just delayed. Okay, so the wireless emergency alert. So you probably get a tone on your cell phone because they're very concerned. Anybody remaining in this area probably is in a life-threatening situation at this point. So that does include the SPI timber mill down here. So I would not be surprised to see these evacuations expand further this evening. There is a little bit of a reprieve in the sense that this arm of the reservoir, as you can see, that's going to provide, hopefully, a fire break, although under these conditions, I suppose it could potentially spot across the narrow bits here. But the problem is, up at the northern end of the reservoir, which is where the fire is headed, there's actually pretty dense brush and grass leading all the way up into the southern portion of Jamestown. So that is the concern. A little hard to tell exactly what's going on. 2.7 fire was also updated. Okay, so that was just the shelter location update. Let's take a look at the cameras again. Again, this is one of the fires at Don Pedro. That's smoky. This is looking at the major fire near Chinese camp, which again, it's a little indistinct, but here is what I'm a little bit concerned about. It's clearly still an active fire in this region. You can see the smoke plume rising like that. Look at these altocumulus clouds. This is the classic, there might be elevated lightning again, kind of signature. So the atmosphere is trying to produce yet more lightning. One thing I wanted to show, there's another view, Don Pedro. I'm just scrolling through a bunch of cameras that are all showing active fires. Here's a brief aside. This is a tweet from the Weather Service in Sacramento earlier today. There was officially a downburst near Carmichael and Orangevale this morning in the eastern suburbs of Sacramento. It looks like... it looks like it was a pretty limited, just southwest of Citrus Heights, so literally between North Highlands, Citrus Heights, and Carmichael. There were wind gusts estimated of 70 miles an hour that brought down trees and power lines. This appears to be associated with a downburst from a decaying thunderstorm, so you might have heard the lightning. It might have been breezy to windy, but in this particular location, these winds were pretty darn strong, 70 miles an hour, and caused some damage. We could see additional downbursts like that. So this is the official event statement from the Weather Service. So essentially a damaged swath, 2.5 miles long and 1.5 miles wide. I got questions from folks earlier, was there a tornado? And the answer is definitively no. This is definitely not a tornadic type event. But they are weak tornado strength, but they're in straight line form rather than rotating form as a tornado. So that did occur earlier in the east. That was this morning. It was why apparently 10,000 people in Sacramento were without power for a while earlier today. I don't know if any remain. Okay. Let me adjust my lighting a little bit more. This is the problem as we get into the season where the sun is changing significantly on the horizon here. Okay, now I don't look quite so ghostly pale. All right, looking back at satellite imagery, yeah, so honestly, this is filling in, and, oops, let me get my drawing tool. This is filling in. I would expect there to be some more activity in this region this evening. It really does look like we're headed for more thunderstorms. Well, if I go to the northern Sacramento Valley where there are now thunderstorms, these are those elevated cells. They're merging in under the gigantic anvil from the surface-based severe storm to the east, but there are these elevated convective cells right between Chico. So there's that line, that really linear feature in the valley that seems to be the boundary where wild and crazy stuff is happening. So this whole view is really quite something right now. If I go back to radar, yeah, so for example, when I say even though there's heavy downpours, there can be dry strikes, look at this. Look at these strikes, look at the strikes over Oroville and then down by Palermo. Fortunately, these are again down in the flats, less likely to start a major fire, but that's the concern as these storms move northward. There was no rain in Oroville. There was no rain in Palermo. They're about to get a big outflow boundary, and they just got bolts from the blue, cloud-to-ground lightning, away from the rain, away from the clouds. So you can see new storms are developing behind the outflow boundary. Generally speaking, the storms to the right of the outflow boundary will be wetter storms. Not guaranteed, but generally on this side of the outflow, they'll be wetter. On the other side of it, they're going to be drier. So think of it as sort of wet and dry, depending on where you are. But these outflow boundaries are meeting right around Placerville, and that's going to be interesting. Again, this is looking like a pretty ugly fire signature. By the way, for those interested in the science here, if you look at the correlation coefficient, so it is literally the degree of correlation between different reflecting objects or particles in the air. So high correlation means it's a correlation of size of all the particles that it's detecting. So high correlation means the sizes are all similar, as you might expect if you had a cloud full of raindrops. Raindrops, they vary in size, but in general, you don't have a 2-foot wide raindrop and a 2-centimeter wide raindrop. They're all, within the same general range. Correlation coefficient then, if it's high, is probably hydrometeor related, meaning precipitation. If correlation coefficient is low, it is much more likely to be non-hydrometeor related. So in the context of a tornado, it might be debris in the air, or in the context of a wildfire, it would be in the form of smoke, ash, and lofted debris from the fire that you can have fine ash particles, you can have giant ash particles, sometimes you can even loft burning embers and leaves, and so the correlation coefficient would be low. I'm going to make a prediction. So you can see right now, these are all thunderstorms, so high correlation coefficient, near 1. This is all precipitation, high correlation coefficient. All of this is not precipitation, it's just reflecting off of random objects. But here, take a look. You can see the outflow boundary a little bit. Yep. Low correlation coefficient because in that boundary is dust, insect, maybe some smoke, maybe even a few birds. But here, unfortunately, we go down to the fire, and what do we see down by Chinese Camp, Jamestown, Sonora? A really distinctive plume of non-hydrometeor echoes. So you can see on the left here that there's some green and yellow on the map. There's also green and yellow over here, but look at this. Correlation coefficient in the pink is near 1. So high correlation coefficient over here, low correlation coefficient over here, and this is the fire, and this is the rain. So that's one way you can determine, using dual polarization Doppler radar, which not all countries have, whether you're dealing with a fire or rain. And in this case, it's important because you actually have both. Over a 20-mile difference, there's meteorological thunderstorm echoes here and non-meteorological smoke here. And in general, by the way, practically speaking, it's never a good thing when you see this distinct signature. And again, I'm pretty concerned as to what's going to happen with this fire. There's about to be a wind shift. You see this boundary coming in. You could call it a sea breeze. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's a boundary. It's probably going to induce. So the winds right now at the surface are going like this. When this boundary moves through the fire zone, the winds are probably going to shift to the east. So that's a pretty significant shift, and that is going to put populated areas potentially in harm's way. But again, I also expect an outflow boundary to develop here. So what may happen is the fire, this might be the progression this evening. The winds are currently from the south. Then they're going to be from the west, and then shortly thereafter, they might be from the east. So this could pose some significant problems. These boundaries are getting tantalizingly close. I guess we'll find out what happens. Okay, let's check out watch duty again. Here's the 6.5 fire. No updated footprint at this point. Let's check the 2.7 fire. No big update there either. Okay, let's see if there's any other fires we're getting updates on right now. Let's see if there's anything popping up here. I'm not hearing anything right now. Check the cameras again. The real problem will be if there's any more lightning tonight that sparks fires. Resources are kind of tapped out, and so we're going to start to run into some issues. What a satellite image that is. All right, so I'm going to bring my camera. You're going to see me on screen again. Changing my lighting as I go, ad hoc, as it were. All right, I'm just reading the comments here so I can respond. Actually, give me a minute. I'm going to turn the background light on. All right, very low technical solution there by increasing ambient lighting. Hopefully helps. The question from totally socked in here with marine layer here in Santa Cruz Mountains. Any chance this will turn into rain? Unfortunately, essentially no. Sorry, not in the Bay Area. Ron Thompson mentions a nice steady rain near the airport in South Lake Tahoe. Probably a lot more coming. The rain last week kept the fire situation with the new rain keeps going. Yeah, I mean, so a very variable situation, a completely different situation right now from the crest of the Sierra Nevada eastward than it is in the western slope. Just a night and day difference. Mary mentions the Chinese camp has a lot of old wood buildings. It is, I mean, it is a historical town, and so unfortunately it is not a modern fire-resilient community in the way that others might be. So unfortunately there is significant potential for structural loss under these conditions there. Comments that the cell near Oroville is throwing some lightning bolts. To be clear, Jamestown isn't immediately at threat, but it could potentially be later as soon as tonight. So there's no evacuation warnings or orders right now, but it's a keep an eye out kind of situation for Jamestown right now. Yeah, there's folks mentioning that the Weather Service in Sacramento, that comment about the downburst this morning was definitely the thing. It was the singular event that a lot of people were reporting in the morning live stream, having personally experienced. It was definitely that downburst from the decaying thunderstorm, which apparently did have gusts up to 70 miles an hour, so that could cause some real damage. Mary asks, does CAL FIRE have its own meteorologist? I believe that there are the incident meteorologists with the National Weather Service, and they embed with both, mainly with federal fire teams on incidents. So all the fires that ignited today don't have federal teams on them yet, or at least don't have incident management teams because they just started today. Some of them that go big might. CAL FIRE shares meteorological resources with some other agencies. It's actually a little bit unclear to me exactly the organizational structure of the meteorological entities that interface with both CAL FIRE, so the state fire agency, Department of Forestry, and with the federal government. The feds have their own meteorologists. I believe North and South Ops, which are the different operational divisions in California for wildland firefighting, have meteorologists as well. These aren't huge teams, though. I mean, you might think that there are dozens of meteorologists at the ready. It's usually a couple of people. Incident meteorologists, they usually will send one person to big events, big fires. They are National Weather Service meteorologists on loan from local field offices. And guess what might happen if there aren't enough local meteorologists at your favorite field office? There's going to be less availability of incident meteorologists from the Weather Service to deploy. So there are some. In fact, I know someone who's currently on the Garnet fire. Incident meteorologist is from, I believe, the Los Angeles Weather Service office. So I'm not saying that there's no incident meteorologists going out there, but in an environment of scarcity where there was no update, for example, from the Hanford or Sacramento offices last night before this dry lightning event, there is a challenge of there not being enough resources available in some cases. And so I'm sure the meteorologists who are staffed at the fire weather entities with North Ops and South Ops and the different predictive services divisions are on it, but there are only so many of them. And the same thing is true of other operational fire weather meteorologists. We do not supply tremendous numbers of these folks. So sometimes I like to make a call out when you notice something on radar, because you never know who's watching. Yeah, there are some new storms firing, unfortunately. The comment that the BB mentions that the fire departments can submit spot weather forecasts to Weather Service. That is true, although you do have to have a certain... they don't happen instantly. The spot forecast requests often will be issued for prescribed burns when you know that you're going to be doing a burn and you can plan in advance, or when there's a fire incident that has surpassed initial attack, so it's gone into extended attack, and you have fire camps being built and you have resources converging from a wide region, a combination of resources potentially as well, local, state, federal, depending on where the fire is burning. Those are more likely situations where you'd see spot forecasts. You don't always get those moment by moment when a fire first breaks out in its first day of burning. And they also aren't continuously updated either. You might issue a forecast for the day, but the nowcasting, that's usually done by incident meteorologists on site in real time, and most of these fires at this point don't have incident meteorologists. So there's the on-call predictive services meteorologists, the small team they've got. But again, there's dozens of fires right now. There's a very complex pattern evolving. So I'm refreshing my watch duty because sometimes I find that you need to do that to get the most recent information here. Since there are some expanding evacuations on some of these fires, again, a lot of good catches. Most of the fires today are now contained. Some of them are extinguished, but most of them are at least contained. But again, it's the ones that get away, even if it's just a few, that can cause big-time problems. And there will likely be new ones that pop up as well as holdovers. So lightning strikes that smoldered for a while become more prominent. There was a new fire, by the way, down in East Bakersfield. That might be a holdover from lightning. It could be something else. Looks like it's burning in the grass. Grass and brush, so we might check on that in a little while. Okay, so now there are new evacuations up along the Highway 36 corridor in northwestern California from the Cedar Fire. Let me just take a look at how that looks. Okay, it might be time for me to bring... Might be time for me to bring the screen share back up. There's a question of whether these fires will merge like the CZU complex. Maybe some of them will. I hope that most of them won't, because it would imply that they span the distance between them currently, but some of them probably will. I would expect there to be some complex naming on some of these fires. Let me go share my screen again, because there's still a lot to show. Alright, here's the latest satellite update. You can now see, as I mentioned, you can see this outflow boundary propagating. This might actually trigger storms. So we're just going to have to keep a close eye on that. Look at the thermal signatures. Actually, let me bring up the fire layer. Yeah, it's not showing enough. You can see some of the fires with this, but it really is clearer on shortwave right now. Again, you see the cluster of the 3 major fires of concern right here. There's the Garnet fire, and then there's the Salt fire. And then these are the fires up in northwestern California. So at this point, you know, in California, fires of significance. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 at this point that are currently visible prominently at satellite scale. The new fire I mentioned along the Highway 36 corridor, this is the Cedar fire. This is the view from the Pickett Peak lookout camera. I'm not sure what community is being evacuated here. Let's see what it says. The zone POM 375. Usually they're related to a place name. I don't know exactly where this is, but you can clearly see from here that there are structures, there are homes, people live in the woods. It's kind of a wild and urban intermix nightmare kind of place. New mandatory evacuations. Let's look like what this looks like on camera here. Again, this is up in northwestern California. I don't know if this is a lightning fire or not. Here's the last 15 minutes. That does not look great. Clearly spreading in between structures in timber. Not a wind-driven fire, so it's got that going for it, but it's hot, dry, and there could be erratic thunderstorm outflows potentially later on. Still not seeing any major new fires yet from lightning up in the North Valley, which is good. That could change, though. All right, let's take a look at the cameras again. There's Don Pedro. I'm going to get rid of this camera because you can't really see. This towering cumulus, altocumulus clouds. A lot of these cameras are getting a real obstructed view right now. There's another view of Don Pedro and the southern fire on Don Pedro Reservoir. This is the fire down in western, I think it's officially now in western Fresno County. You can see the big thunderhead behind it. This is looking south. Let's go back to the radar. So those showers and thunderstorms continue in the North Valley, although I'm not seeing any new lightning in the last couple of minutes. They put down some bolts near Oroville, Palermo, and then apparently are sending fewer bolts. But look at that outflow boundary that's about to move through. That could wreak some havoc. Again, this outflow boundary is very close to meeting between Roseville and Auburn. Could be interesting swirling of the winds there. And I think we're starting to see the formation of an outflow boundary right along here. So now we have another converging boundaries right near this fire region. Okay, we have a new cluster of thunderstorms down here. So where is this? Oh, this is the lower foothills once again. So this is east of Merced. This is Highway 99, so it's just east, but this is still technically in the valley. It's downslope from Mariposa. Unfortunately, folks, this is it is more than likely that this thunderstorm probably has already sparked a new fire and could continue to spark new fires as it goes north. These are likely to be lightning on the drier side. And also, notice in this cell, most of the lightning is falling either west of or just inside the rain core, but most of the rain is falling to the east. So let's keep an eye on that one. It truly is a wild set of radar imagery. Here's a southern San Joaquin Valley radar view, a little bit closer to that. That actually might be a slightly less dry storm overall, but again, the problem is that the lightning is occurring on the periphery, on the dry side of the storm. You can see, there's that outflow boundary. It's a little bit harder to see, but you can kind of see it on radar now. Here's that fire south of Coalinga. Again, that's in far southwestern, so this is... Fresno County is huge, by the way. It spans all the way from the Coast Ranges to the crest of the Sierra Nevada. One of California's more impressive spans. I think only LA County has a similar level of geographic breadth, maybe. So that's a big fire, but what we're seeing are, again, a new round of thunderstorms in the far East Valley lower foothills. So I'll go back up to Sacramento. By the way, those big thunderstorms we saw on the camera view, these are all the way down in the mountains of Ventura County where there's still a flash flood warning. This storm has just been sitting there, so no fire risk within this one, but probably some flash flooding going on in remote areas up in the mountains there. Didn't mean to draw that. Let's go up to Sacramento. This is just, I can't look away. This is one of those radar maps you just don't see in California, and a lot of it is a little bit nerve-wracking. We have this huge fire, we have these outflow boundaries, we have thunderstorms, including some in the North Valley, we have some new ones developing in the South Valley, and just look at that. Just as I'm talking. This is what I mean about dry lightning strikes. Look at this last lightning strike. I didn't circle it correctly, but you get the idea. It's completely outside of the rain core. All the lightning on this is west of Mariposa. It's going to be throwing bolts. This cell actually is going to be close enough to the fire that it could cause some problems with outflows. So let's look at watch duty again. See if anything's popping up. I guess that would be... Let's do some co-location. So we're kind of looking right now at a triangle between Merced, Mariposa, and Yosemite Lakes. That's kind of where we're thinking about. So let's go watch duty. Sorry, I'm so tired. I already forgot what I said. We're talking about, essentially, it's east of Merced, between Merced and Mariposa is a good litmus test. Okay, so a little bit further north. Is that Mariposa here? Yeah. Okay, so we're kind of looking for new fires now potentially popping up in this area. So we'll keep an eye on that. The Lick Fire, that sounds new. Where is this? Oh no, that's been up there for a while, sorry. This is up in off of Highway 3, up by Shasta. Forebay Fire sounds like... This might actually be a lightning ignition. This is... right where... This is... right near the Thermalito forebay. In that critical water infrastructure. This is burning in the grass. But it does actually have a fairly big expanse of grass to run in here, so let's see if that was lightning. So this would have been just west of Oroville, so we go north. Let's go north. Let's zoom in. Well, let's see. Just west of Oroville, yep, that would be right here, so I'm guessing there's a lightning fire just west of Oroville here. Also, expanding showers. Maybe some of these can at least bring some decent rain, hopefully, in addition with the lightning. But again, look at that. That's a dry lightning strike, even though the thunderstorms are producing heavy precipitation. So it's going to be a game of cat and mouse between the downpours. This one is concerning, though, because this one's throwing bolts like crazy once again. So that is probably a new lightning fire. That's the first one of the day up in north of I-80. Well, yeah, probably the first one north of I-80. All right, I'm going to go back to... So I'm going to go back on the screen here, take a look at comments, and then I'm going to decide what I'm going to do for the evening here. All right here. Looks like we've got Zeke Lunder in the chat, so hi Zeke. It's turned into a much more active start to September, that's for sure. We'll see, there's not been a lot of lightning yet up in the northwestern mountains up by Shasta, but there might be later this evening and tonight, and those might be wetter storms up there, but I think we're sort of at a state where there's probably going to be a fair number of holdovers mixed in with the active fires that are already burning there. Yeah, Big Clutch is mentioning the new start west of Oroville, which is probably a lightning strike. Again, that's down in the flats in the grass. Probably not going to be a huge problem relative to everything else, but... All right, so I guess technically I can poll the audience, but I'm not going to bother to do a formal version of that. So, show of hands, if folks are interested, what I might do is take a quick break to go eat something, and then keep this live stream open. I'll just play a brief message that I'm going to return, and then I'll leave potentially the Sacramento radar up live in the meantime, because there is so much going on. There's probably going to be even more going on in about an hour, and I do need to eat something. So I think what I might do, if folks are interested, is I will probably take a 20-minute break, come back, but I'm going to leave this session open. So unlike in the past, when I have restarted the session, there's already a lot of folks viewing. I can leave the radar up because I know that's going to be of interest to folks. So looks like there's already enough interest. What I'm going to do is this. Keep the session open. I'm going to turn it over to radar. You're going to see a brief "I'll be back" message, but then about 30 seconds after that, it's going to go over to the live radar imagery. And then when I'm done with that, I'm going to come back and see what it looks like, because there is a lot going on. Before I do that, just want to emphasize that there are a couple of fires that are threatening communities tonight. And that was not really the case to the same extent 24 hours ago. We had some fires. Most of them were in more remote areas. Some of them were pretty big, even pretty intense, but they weren't directly threatening communities with significant evacuations, and there are today. And that includes specifically the fires of most concern. Before I go break for dinner, right now, this would be the 6.5 fire, which was last mapped just shy of 3,000 acres, but is likely larger. There are credible reports of structural loss in Chinese camp as the fire continues to move to the north. And there is a separate fire to the north of that, on the other side of New Melones Lake, up by Murphy's. There are evacuation orders all the way up to the south side of town in Murphy's, and evacuation warnings for most of the town of Murphy's. There have not been a lot of updates on this fire officially recently, so I don't know exactly what's going on. It still does appear to be threatening the community, but the bigger threat right now appears to be down on the 6.5 fire. There, in addition to several other lightning fires that are burning in the region. There are some new mandatory evacuations on the Cedar Fire up along Highway 36. Again, that's up in northwestern California. There are a couple of subdivisions directly in harm's way there, so even though it's otherwise fairly remote, there are people who live there. And there are some additional lightning fires that are currently popping up, with new lightning occurring right now down by Mariposa. So I'm going to take that break. I'm going to leave this open, I'll see you again in 20 to 30 minutes. But again, if you want to stay, feel free to stay in the session. All right. So see you all in a little while. All right, folks. Hopefully this audio comes through for those of you who have stayed on. Looks like a few hundred of you have. Just trying to get the lighting right. It's a little bit harsh at the moment. Just trying to turn it down so I don't have so much glare in my face. All right, I think that's a little better. Let's see. So I did take a look at a number of things while I was on break. Got a quick dinner. Thanks for sticking around. Fortunately, I had some leftovers to heat up quickly, so it wasn't a full cooking process. While I was gone, multiple new fires have ignited, and there are new evacuations. So let's just get right to it. Okay, so back to... Oh, I need to share. I almost forgot here. Here we go. All right. So remember... Well, actually, let me show the lightning first. So let's go to the radar map, because it is really quite a fascinating one. As I mentioned earlier, the south flow boundary is converging with the sea breeze, and it's now happening. Next few minutes we're going to see what it's going to do, but it's already doing some fairly interesting things. There's new convective cells and some showers and thunderstorms going up, and now the central Sacramento Valley as far south as Yuba City, which may be directly related to at least the outflow boundary, maybe the collision with the sea breeze. So we are getting something. We're getting thunderstorms now consistently between Chico and Oroville. Unclear how much rain there is. I'll be interested for some reports east of Chico maybe and west of Oroville up towards Sterling City. I'm curious how much of this rain is reaching the ground. Obviously there's some precipitation, but a fair bit of it may be evaporating. There's additional showers and thunderstorms developing behind the outflow boundary. These are a lot more likely to be wet. These are less likely to be dry storms. So actually they might still start fires, by the way, but these are going to more likely be holdover fires. So it's going to rain. Lightning might strike a tree or a snag or something, and it'll smolder for 6, 12, 24 hours before maybe popping back up in the sunlight tomorrow when it dries out. So this is a bit different than the dry lightning threat in other places, but where we are still getting dry lightning is down here, and unfortunately, dry thunderstorms have redeveloped. Remember how I mentioned right before I went to dinner break that this cell might cause a couple of wildfires? Well, there's at least 2 new wildfires that have erupted as a result of this specific thunderstorm since half an hour ago. I'll talk about that in a minute. New cells developing west of the fire near Murphy's and Chinese Camp. New lightning occurring between Modesto and Sonora. So this is a big time firefighter watch out situation right now. So for anyone on the lines, anyone going to the fires near the reservoirs, near Chinese Camp, near Murphy's, you have several immediate near-term hazards. We're talking like in the next 15 minutes to the next 60 minutes. Outflow boundary from strong Sierra thunderstorms. That's moving this way. That's about to impact the fire. That's 10 to 15 minutes out. You have a sea breeze front moving in from the west. That's about to converge right over your fire zone. So these boundaries are going to converge, it looks like literally right. In fact, you even have another outflow boundary coming in from the north. You also now have, in addition, thunderstorms actively developing on the fire's western flank. So you actually have cloud-to-ground lightning, which is itself a hazard, but the bigger challenge may be new spot fires ignited by the lightning and yet again, strong gusty outflow winds. It is also possible that in the next 60 minutes or so, that the fire, which is here, starts to generate its own pyrocumulonimbus cloud if it has sufficient intensity. So let's bring back the dual polarization radar, and we can see right here, again, as I mentioned earlier, science, high correlation means in this region, that's all smoke from a fire. But all the pinks, those are actual radar returns. So you can see this fire zone is now sandwiched in between actual precipitation echoes. Now that doesn't mean there's a lot of rain reaching the ground. A lot of it's virga, rain that's evaporating before it reaches the ground. There's also lightning contained in this cloud. and there could well be lightning that pops up right over the fire zone. But this is a pretty fraught fire situation with these. I mean, look at all these boundaries. Strong, maybe even locally damaging winds, erratic, gusty winds coming from potentially 3 or all 4 cardinal directions over the course of an hour. And the potential for some last-minute evening pyroconvection, pyrocumulus to pyrocumulonimbus clouds. But I mean, just look at these boundaries. I mean, there's just collisions everywhere. Unlike typically in California, these boundaries are resulting in pretty dramatic weather. Thunderstorms, downbursts, outflow boundaries, strong winds, you name it, it's happening somewhere in California as we speak. Go up to Beale Air Force Base. Unfortunately, the lightning has, as expected, now expanded farther north. Now, there is some, this is an older radar image, it's 25 minutes old. Let's see if we can get a newer one. I don't know. You know what? It's actually possible that the Beale radome was hit by lightning. Actually, now that I see this, if anyone has confirmation, but in the last few frames, there were storms developing right over the radar dome. And there is some relatively dry lightning now up between Chico and Paradise, and then up into the foothills. Hard to see how much precipitation is with this, but these are drier storms than we're getting out by Tahoe. And once again, you can also see this huge outflow boundary moving across the valley. Wild things can happen when outflow boundaries go wild. Let's go back to Sacramento, because it really seems like this is the best radar to keep up on screen, because there is just so much going on all at once. Let me go back to the fires, because there are new ones, as I mentioned. So before I went to dinner, I said, I bet you there's going to be a couple of fires from that cell. Well, we now have 2 new fires, the 1-4 fire, the 1-3 fire, burning. Let me get rid of that drawing on screen. These are in the transitional grassland to the scrubland, so it's not quite down on the flats, but these are the lower foothills, just east of Merced, essentially. These fires are already substantially large, 75 acres, 50 acres. Let's see. Let's look at the camera view here. Let's see what there is to see. Okay, let's do this. The camera's bouncing around in the wind, which is not great for a grass fire. You can kind of tell the fire's here. It's actually, if you squint a little bit, you can tell it's making a lot of progress left to right across the screen very quickly. Left to right would be approximately, from where this camera's looking, west to east. So that is that's going pretty quickly. There is another fire. There is the 1-3 fire. These are wind-driven fires, mainly in grass and brush. This one's a little bit easier to see. You can kind of see its progression. You can see the column. You can tell it's wind-driven because the column is tilted over. So it's not rising up vertically like this. It's sort of leaning over like that. So again, you can kind of see the column in this fire plume is like that. So the air is getting vented away that way. The fire is clearly being pushed by winds like this in this direction, which again, based on where this camera is looking, this is moving from left to right across the camera, so that would be on the map from southwest to northeast. So these fires are currently moving upslope, which is of course the direction that the slope is going to help them in terms of their progression. The upslope is going to favor continued rapid progression potentially. So those are just the 2 new fires that erupted from that one thunderstorm cell that I mentioned before dinner. In addition, I do not know whether this is lightning related or not. I don't know there's been as much lightning down here recently. There's the Palladino fire just east of Bakersfield. It looks like this is a fast-running grass fire that's going to jump Alfred Harrell Highway. I'm sorry, I don't know Bakersfield that well, so I don't really know the exact area, but that's a pretty substantial plume. You can see the last this is just 15 minutes, and it's getting it's got some pretty rapid forward progression. I think this is the highway here, and they're concerned that it's going to hop the highway. And as you can see, there are structures. This is on the other side of the Kern River, I believe, from the fire, but under current conditions, it's quite possible this wind-driven grass fire could jump the highway and threaten structures there. So we may see Yet another fire with evacuations soon, all the way down in Bakersfield. Again, these are all new fires since I broke for dinner. We've got, again, these 2 new fires here. And then let's go up, let's check on the most threatening fire right now. There's an update on the 6.5 fire. They are continuing to expand evacuation warnings. The last update from Watch Duty was all areas, roads from Bell Mooney to Jacksonville Road West to Highway 49. This is a evacuation warning. I'm trying to see where that is. For whatever reason, maybe I need to refresh the map again. It does not seem to be showing up. All areas from Bell Mooney and Jacksonville West to Highway 49. I think... Where is 49 in here? This is 49, so I'm not quite sure. That may be up here. I think that is... Okay, so here is Jacksonville Road. I don't know if Old Jacksonville is different from Jacksonville Road. If that's the case, though, this is the Jacksonville Road corridor. Get rid of that drawing. This is the Jacksonville Road corridor right here. So it's possible Old Jacksonville is a different. In any case, this doesn't look like it's fully managed yet, and there could yet be more evacuations to come. Again, this fire footprint is old. This is a map from a couple hours ago. It's continued to spread rapidly, so I would expect this fire is significantly north of this point. Hopefully they've managed to protect the SPI lumber yard because it's got a lot of kiln dried wood there, but that then means that Jamestown is potentially next. Now, it doesn't look like there's any evacuations right now for anywhere in Jamestown, but again, I would keep an eye on things given how things are evolving pretty chaotically right now. The other big one, the 2.7 fire, no recent updates. So we're not getting very many updates. This is not necessarily a no news is good news situation. It's a little bit difficult to get information out in these kinds of moments. So let's take a look at the satellite imagery again. This is, again, a very fascinating one. You can kind of see this line in the Central Valley. East of this line, we're actually seeing thunderstorms redeveloping right now. And this is partly because there is a westward propagating outflow boundary pretty much from this line of storms all across the Sierra. We're seeing a narrow line of elevated thunderstorms developing once again here. This is where there is dry lightning and new fires igniting. We have wetter thunderstorms behind the outflow boundary. These are causing heavy downpours. Less likely to ignite fires, although holdovers that pop up later are still possible. But if we go to shortwave infrared imagery, this is a much more active fire map than we've had in a long time. So let me do some annotation here. This is the fire in western Fresno County. It's getting pretty big. There's another grass fire in Fresno County, apparently. I don't even know what that one is called. Here is the new fire down by Bakersfield. Here is the giant Garnet fire, which has blown up today with pyrocumulonimbus. There are two new fires here that are hidden by clouds because there's a thunderstorm on top of them. There are a cluster of 3 major fires from lightning earlier today in the central Sierra. This is near south of Sonora. This is the one near Chinese Camp Murphy's. In addition, a cluster of fires that have been around for a few days, but that are increasing again up in northwestern California. These outflow boundaries from these thunderstorms are going to reach these fires up here later tonight and potentially cause them to have a nocturnal blowup. Additional dry lightning is possible, again, in this entire region tonight. And so this could cause more problems. But this is a pretty remarkable satellite imagery. By the way, since folks are staying for the evening, it seems, I did want to fly north a bit because my colleague Neil LaRue pointed out earlier today that there's a pretty terrible wildfire outbreak in central British Columbia right now. And you can see it right here. These are very intense, high-intensity, large, numerous fires, mainly ignited by lightning in the boreal forests and this is relatively far west. This is away from the coastal influence, so you can see there's coastal marine layer fog over here, but here you're above it, you're east of you're sandwiched in between the mountain ranges here and the Rockies here. So you're sort of in this inland influence valley. You can actually see the topography of interior BC highlighted by, see all the smoke lingering in the lower valleys. So these are essentially all the lower elevation regions are smoked in, but the mountain tops and the hilltops are all above the smoke layer. But the other interesting thing is if you see, this is known as a dilation axis, as Neil LaRue pointed out on Twitter. So you can kind of see that the smoke is entering this region and sort of getting spread out as the winds diverge or converge. So this is essentially the kind of wind flow that you've got. And so you have good ventilation here, which is why all these fires are going crazy in this region. But you kind of have that divergence along that dilation axis. So interesting meteorological tracer where you can see this kind of flow, this upper level divergence in this region here. But the more consequential thing is that this is literally the hottest week in autumn that British Columbia has ever experienced. The next couple of days, except in regions that receive too much smoke to see sun, which actually is looking like it might occur, it's possible that some places in BC will not set all-time records because they get smoked in like midnight level smoke levels. But everywhere else in BC is going to see one of their hottest autumn weeks on record, if not their all-time hottest September day. And that is not great given the level of fire activity we're already seeing before that happens. As I mentioned, these are huge and numerous forest fires up in west central BC. And we also see all these other twinkling little fires in southern BC, northern Washington. Fire season is not over yet. In fact, at this point, it looks like we're entering probably the most active period of fire season so far this year. And it's happening simultaneously in British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, and California. And that may cause problems as federal resource availability decreases, both due to seasonal absence and the ongoing DOGE-related cuts to Forest Service and other federal agencies. There are fewer red-carded individuals available this year, and also there are continue to be rumors that FEMA may not exist in a matter of weeks. Clearly, FEMA's functionality has become degraded in recent weeks and months, but it is unclear whether it is able to adequately respond to a major disaster, or in particular, multiple concurrent major disasters in the U.S. And there was a report that came out today suggesting, a watchdog group suggesting that, in fact, FEMA would not be able to respond to a catastrophic hurricane landfall this September or October. I do not know. I haven't read it since it came out today and have been a little bit busy, but that same report presumably would apply to a major wildfire outbreak as well. We don't necessarily have a fully functioning emergency response system at this point. In fact, I think it's quite fair to say our emergency response system is significantly weaker than it was a year ago, based on the policy changes and implementations that have been made. So that's probably all I'm going to say about that for now. I hope we don't need them more than we already have used them this year. FEMA has had a pretty significant presence in California, if you recall, from the catastrophic Southern California wildfires back in January, which feels like a lifetime ago. But I just want to linger on this satellite image because it's one we are not going to repeat too often. I hope, because this is a pretty disruptive one, but it is remarkable from a meteorology perspective to see the complexity of everything that's going on here. It really is kind of amazing. All right, going back to watch duty, seeing what updates we have or don't have on any of these fires. Looks like the most recent update is on the 6.5 fire. All right, 6.5 fire now estimated at 4,000 acres. Let's see here. I don't think this footprint has yet been updated. Yeah, I don't think that this is the updated fire footprint. Well, maybe it is. I honestly don't know. But clearly it was larger than 3,000. It's probably also larger than 4,000 at this point. 2.7 fire, any updates? No. Nothing new. Let's see what's new. What's going on here? Let's see if we've got Foothill fire. That's okay. That's not an active event. Let's see what's going on up north. All right, we do have a couple of fire. Okay, so there was the stage line fire. That was probably a lightning fire, but looks like it's out. There's the forebay fire. I mentioned this earlier. This is in the Thermalito forebay, burning in grass, a pretty containable spot. Not really any big concerns there. This is a camera view of the other fire, which is supposedly mostly contained, so I wouldn't worry about that one. Not seeing any new reports of fires up here. Oh, actually, I take that back. Here are a couple of new fire reports up in Plumas County. Remember how I mentioned there was dry lightning up there earlier? This is one. There's this is the Willow fire. It looks like a fairly remote spot. Sounds like they've got a dozer up there burning in pine and brush. Again, with resource limited availability, aircraft aren't going to be able to fly much longer. This one has some potential. And this is not so far from a pretty, well, by Northeastern California standards, a paragon of civilization along the Highway 70 here, with some with a few small towns and some subdivisions in the woods as well, west of Portola. So that one has some potential. We'll see what it does. Almost certainly lightning. The Carmen fire, another one, probably lightning. This one has a better shot of being contained tonight because it's near some roads. It's also right near quite a few structures though. So let's take a look at a camera here. There is a little bit of rain up here, so this is also the kind of fire where there's some hope that there might be extinguishment, but the other problem is the holdovers that might pop up later. So there are new lightning fires again since I took that break up in Northeastern California. This is a new one. Where is this? Vegetation fire. Let's see. Okay, I'm guessing. Okay, this is here. This might be. Yep, this is another lightning fire by Knight's Ferry. This one is in the grass. This definitely in the grassland. So, good news, it's grass. It won't burn as intensely. Bad news is it's grass and it can burn quickly. This is just south of 108, and they're going to lose air support soon. So they probably have time for a couple of drops if there's any tankers or copters available. But let's see if there's a camera on this. I don't think there's any cameras. That's yet another new fire. Going to distract. Probably going to share some resources with the 6.5, the 2.8, the 6.2, and the 2.7 fires here. I know these are different operational divisions, but I'm mostly talking about the air support that would probably be shared in this case. Okay, let's look at some cameras. That's the Garnet fire. It's blowing up like it has been every day, but today is especially big. This is down western Fresno County in the Coast Ranges. Fire there, more smoke. Here are some active flames. Let's run this. This is the Moccasin Peak camera. This is the smaller of the two fires that I think CAL FIRE is pretty much just letting burn into the bay here at the reservoir because there's no structures, and it's a great fire break. It's, several hundred yards wide of water, and so they have bigger concerns. I think they're just going to try and control the heel of the fire maybe, and then let the head of it just run into the water. That's my guess. Would be probably a smart, an obvious operational strategy there. Again, plumes of smoke on like every camera that I can pull up. It's a little bit indistinct. It's a little bit hard to tell what's going on. Let's see if we loop this. So here, okay, so it's raining. Here you go. It's raining in this image. Do you see that in the last couple of frames? So there's a fire. It's got a bending over arc here. And then the last few shots, there's some rain. So where is that? I don't know exactly where the camera is, but it's somewhere down here. And we got those outflow boundaries right ready to go into that fire. So I think these are probably the lightning strikes, by the way, that just started that new grass fire. Again, there's a little bit of rain, but it's not enough to prevent ignitions. And unfortunately, it looks like this cell might just miss the fire zone in terms of precipitation, but we'll see. Keep fingers crossed. Again, that outflow boundary is now more distinct. Do you see it? There it is. There's the upslope. They're meeting over the fire right now. So this is, while we are speaking, we are watching that. In fact, let's try and bring up some cameras, because let's bring up as many cameras as we can. Let's look at camera 1, camera 2. And let's look at this one here. Let's look at west. Let's see what we got here. So you can see some raindrops on the camera, but you also see that they're not necessarily falling on the fire, and there's a lot of wind, shifting wind going on. Hard to tell exactly from the cameras, but here's that very active fire right along. You can see making some reverse upslope runs currently. I'm mainly looking at this though to watch for a wind shift. So let's keep an eye on this for the wind shift that it might produce. Also looking ahead here, this is sort of looking toward the direction the wind is blowing. So what we might expect to see is a big shift from left to right on this camera. So let's keep that up. Let's take a look at the radar. There are still more lightning strikes, so there could still yet be more fires popping up here. Also down by Mariposa. Persistent convection, not seeing a lot of lightning yet by Yuba City, but again, that could pop up at any time. More popping up by Oroville. Tons of lightning now up in Plumas County, although some of this is probably falling with some rain over by Mineral. It's a little, again, hard to tell because the radar beam is pretty high above the surface once you get to that point. Let's see if Beale, no, Beale is down. Yeah, Beale is missing. I kind of wonder if the Beale radome was struck by lightning. It does happen. It's a good way to take it out for a while. Alright, so I think what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to pop this camera on to share a single window. Just give me a minute here. It's going to take me a second to... There we go. So I'm going to keep this up. Oh, that's kind of weird. You see me in the background there. Whatever. I'm just gonna bring myself back full screen. It's been a long day, folks. Okay, so let's see what's going on here. Looking at the questions here. Yeah, several folks mentioning the new starts south of Mariposa associated with the lightning here. Sounds like there's a pretty big resource order for the salt fire, which I don't know if they're going to get. Maybe they'll have time for a drop this evening, but just a lot of stuff going on all at once. Resource competition with a lot of holdovers popping up tomorrow. That might be problematic. Adam mentions word from the Southeast Paradise is pretty good rain, which is better than dry lightning, certainly. Eric mentions one of the longtime Weather West blog post commenters, Stormmaster, who lives, I believe, in or near Sonora, is definitely, as they say, getting the goods this evening. Plenty of storms and wind and lightning and all that. Hopefully no fires. Comment, there's about a 5/10 to a 10th between Paradise and Chico. It's not bad, it's better, but technically dry lightning is anything less than about a 1/10 of an inch. So if there was lightning with those 0.05 to 0.1, that would probably still qualify as dry lightning. And, worth noting, you can still get lightning ignitions even with wet lightning. It's just you get fewer of them, and often they take longer to emerge because the rain temporarily suppresses the heat of the initial lightning strike ignition, but if it hits something like grass or brush, the rain is probably going to be enough to self-extinguish it. But if it hits a tree or a snag, a dead tree or a log or something that's flammable and has some internal insulation from a little bit of water, it's going to burn on the inside, it's going to smolder, and then it's going to potentially pop up again once things dry out and heat up again tomorrow. And by the way, the Weather Service has extended heat advisories for parts of southern and central California for another day or two in some cases, because this heat is not fading as quickly as some of the initial models had suggested. So we have some more hot weather inland. And I would also mention that after the lightning is mostly done late tonight, there could be some isolated Sierra storms tomorrow, but that'll be less unusual. It'll be more typical Sierra storms. Once things dry out tomorrow, it's still going to be hot in the 90s and 100s inland, but we're going to start to get a little more of a marine influence with onshore flow. However, that isn't necessarily good news, because it means we might actually get upslope winds up a lot of the canyons and the coast ranges and the Sierra Nevada. And if we have active lightning fires there, this is going to tend to push some of those up canyon. So they won't be super strong winds, but a stiff 20 or 30 mile an hour breeze will be plenty to cause some problems given the number of fires we have now already, and some of the fires we're likely to see pop up as holdovers in the next 24 or 48 hours after the lightning is finally done. Longer term, there will be cooling. It doesn't look like there's going to be as much lightning. Although the Pacific Northwest, again, the peak of the heat waves hasn't even arrived up there. In BC, it's going to get worse before it gets better. So all of that smoke and ash and fire activity up north is going to get worse before better. The heat is only going to slowly fade up there, and it's not going to culminate in a rain event or anything. It just looks like the heat's going to slowly fade and be replaced by breezier, cooler conditions. It's actually not necessarily a favorable sequence, because what you have, if you have heat and lightning initially, you have ignition and fuel drying, and then you have wind. So any ignitions that start, you then have wind to move it and to ventilate and oxygenate those fires. So it's actually a known progression from heat to lightning to wind. In forested regions, this tends to be a sequence of events that leads to large, persistent fires. And unfortunately, we're seeing this all along the West Coast simultaneously. So this might end up being a rough September in some parts of the West, and in particular along the western coast states in Canadian provinces and in the US along the West Coast, because we're getting this all at once. The big concern will be if we get a big east wind event anywhere along the West Coast before seasonal rains arrive this year. We now have a bunch of ignitions in remote places in the forests that could all run westward with an east wind event. So offshore wind, we can get east winds up in BC and up in the Pacific Northwest. They're less common, but they can occur, and until the rains arrive, there's always going to be a risk of a high fire risk event with those sorts of winds. In California, they're much more common, and they also occur later. So those could happen anytime between September, October, even November, or if you're in Southern California, as we saw this January, all the way into winter. So until the rains arrive now, we're going to be at an escalated state of vigilance and even active firefight potentially. So I know a lot of folks had been commenting on how quiet things were, which is always a good way to jinx things, but also we should probably have been, shouldn't be too surprised that things have heated up, because a lot of the West is in drought. Much of the West has experienced a near-record dry and near-record warm summer. Again, this is not true of the California coast, but almost everywhere else in the West and Western Canada, that has been the way the summer has played out. So we are actually at a pretty volatile situation still when it comes to risk. We just had a lot of good catches, because the fires were nice and spaced out. There was one region that went up first, and then an adjacent region, but the other one calmed down. Within California, we've had some pretty nasty fire starts, but all of them have really been good catches by CAL FIRE and the Forest Service, because they've occurred one at a time and under mild to moderate burning conditions. So we've had, big fire on the western slope of the Sierra that all of CAL FIRE's resources can be thrown at it. Massive amount of air support under favorable conditions. It's 90 degrees and light winds. It's a little warm, but that's a pretty favorable condition to use your air support, use your ground resources to put a stop on something pretty quickly, especially when you only have one to focus on. But now we have dozens, and now we have dozens in each West Coast state and in Western Canada, and there may be even hundreds. So there could potentially be hundreds of new ignitions that come to light between California, Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia as a result of this lightning event. There have been tens of thousands of lightning strikes, and that is enough to potentially result in hundreds of ignitions, particularly because the only part of this region that is not in a significant drought, by the way, right now, is most of Northern California. So the ignitions we're seeing there are in the context of only moderately dry conditions. Everywhere else in the West, it's actually a lot drier and it's been a lot hotter. And so the background context here is that the rest of the West is even worse off than California is in terms of ignition likelihood and severity of the fires that are occurring right now. All right, just looking at the comments again here. Folks already reporting a couple of yet more fires since the last time I opened the watch duty map, so let me just see here. There's a question, another question, is this a complete failure of the numerical models regarding the California weather? No, not at all. In fact, I was actually saying that this was a remarkably well-predicted event by our state-of-the-art high-resolution weather models, which once again was not communicated with the public very well. This happens over and over and over and over and over again. It is incredibly aggravating in the weather and disaster world that the good information is out there and it almost never seems to reach people in timely fashion still, even in our information meta age. I'm not even sure what to call it anymore with the rise of platforms that are now generating about as much misinformation as they are actual usable information, but maybe that's a story for another day. But my point is, this was not in any of the weather apps, but it was in the area forecast discussion. If you look at the San Francisco Bay Area forecast discussion, I talked about it in a blog post I wrote on Friday, in a live stream yesterday, and then again this morning. So it was foreseeable, and it was foreseen, but that message didn't appear to really get out. All right here. Yes, there's a comment from Eric that the HRRR, the High Resolution Rapid Refresh model, which did a pretty good job with this overnight lightning, as I mentioned, does show the low, which is currently over San Francisco, moving up toward Oregon and potentially causing a thunderstorm outbreak up there tomorrow. Unfortunately, that does seem plausible, and there could be a lot of lightning ignitions up in Oregon and the Pacific Northwest tomorrow. It's not great news, but that is what it looks like right now. A couple of new fire updates. All right, let me share my screen again because it's been a little while. I gotta decide when to cut it off for the evening. So I'm kind of waiting to see what that outflow boundary does to these fires. So with that in mind, let's take a look. Here's the most recent loop. You can see, okay, the wind's picking up. You can see the breeze. Has it shown up yet? I'm not quite sure if I can tell what's going on here in this camera view. Let's just scroll through all these cameras again, see if there's anything particularly dramatic. Here is the most recent view from Moccasin Peak, looking downslope. Not seeing a huge wind shift on this fire yet. Let's take a look. Well, that's a bit of an ominous sunset view. You see smoke, you see a fire, you see thunderstorm clouds. Let's look at the last 15 minutes here. Do we see... Oh man, there's some wild stuff going on down here. Take a look what's going on. I don't know if you can see my cursor. This is one of the fires. Just keep an eye. I'm going to replay it one more time and keep an eye on that area. Looks like there's some wind shifts or some downbursts affecting that fire. Poof, poof. I'm not sure what it is. If we're lucky, it's a bit of rain, but can't quite tell. This camera's not showing us much. All right, this one looks kind of interesting. Let's see. So here the smoke is moving right toward the camera. Last 15 minutes. Yeah, okay, you can kind of see the wind shift here. So look down in this area here. I'm gonna leave that up on screen if I can. Oh, whatever. You see how the smoke starts to move from camera right to left? So that's that onshore push. Now the fire is going to push up slope, up canyon more. So you kind of see the smoke is moving this way, the fire is moving towards the camera. Last few frames, the fire is starting to move perpendicular to the camera, right to left. So there's a wind shift, and that's kind of an ominous view, to be quite honest. Here is the view from the last 8 minutes. Again, you see raindrops. Okay, well, there were raindrops in the beginning. That has since moved on. Obviously, that did not extinguish the fire. You can see it's burning down here. The rain has since moved on. You can see it looks like it's tilting the plume a bit, so it's gotten pretty windy. Not sure what's going on in this view. Very little. It's smoked in. This is also smoked in. You can see sort of this fire billowing in the background, but it's difficult to tell. Here's the fire down in Bakersfield. That still looks a little angry. So obviously it's a grass fire, so it's made a lot of progression on the forward flank. Let's take a look at watch duty again and see what the heck is going on. So I don't know. Maybe they stopped the progression of the fire moving any farther into Chinese camp. I don't know if that footprint is up to date, but I'm kind of guessing it's not, unfortunately. All right, the 2-2 fire has now jumped Highway 4. I don't know what these structures are. Those might be barns of some kind. Looks like this fire is making a run to the north in the grass and brush. Not a lot up there until you get up to Milton and Salt Spring and whatever this road is. Rock Creek Road. So I would guess if this is still running north, it's going to run all the way at least north to this road. Maybe they'll catch it there. So this has the potential to be a pretty big fire. It's already 3,600 acres in the grass. This is definitely an old footprint. The 6-2 fire is definitely bigger than that along Don Pedro Reservoir. Okay, so the 1-4 fire, this one's now supposedly 300 acres estimate, so that's going big. 1-3 fire, no recent update. So those were those lightning fires from that cell earlier this evening. The salt fire, someone was talking about that earlier. Very large air tanker has been requested. The fire is moving north toward Coalinga, so there could potentially, not at this time, eventually be a threat to the southern part of Coalinga. Now, I would be pretty surprised if it actually made it into Coalinga because there's a pretty decent gap of irrigated farm fields. I guess there's technically the vegetation along the creek, but in the absence of a big wind event, I think the town of Coalinga will probably be alright, but I don't know if there's any structures in here. There's maybe a few, not a lot. Those could potentially be at risk in the hills, and anything along the 198 corridor, there are some structures in here. I don't know if that's someone's home or a recreational facility, but that could potentially be a problem later, especially with resource competition. Alright, what are we seeing up here? The 1-4 fire, okay, that's what we just updated. Garnet fire update, that's up to 29,000 acres approximately, so that just continues to chug along. I bet you it's bigger than that. I don't think they could do a full mapping of it actually this evening. Okay, I don't know which one's which. Okay, the 1-4 fire, we already talked about that. The 2-7 fire, this was an update. This is the one up by Murphy's. This one looks like they might be getting a slightly better handle on it. Hasn't expanded that much, up to 584 acres. You can see the northeastern flank of the fire. They're probably being helped out. Actually, here's a vineyard. That might be helping contain it on this end, but it does looks like it has a decent amount of spread potential. in the, I think it's oak woodland, and some chaparral in between structures here. So we'll see what happens here up as it gets closer to Murphy's, but no other update here. The 6-6 fire. This is a new one that was started by lightning within the last hour. Potential for a couple hundred acres. You hear the street racers in the background. I guess it's already dark enough for that to be happening. Again, burning in the grass, but just another one that could potentially be a problem. Here's a new fire. This one had been deactivated in watch duty, but it looks like it's flared back up. Let's see if there's... honestly, it's possible that's a case of mistaken identity, but if it's not, that's actually fairly close to the Copper Cove subdivision on the lake there, so that could be a problem. So just a lot of fires that are potentially problematic right now. The 1-2 fire, okay, this is another one that I'd kind of written off, but it looks like it's not doing anything too crazy, but it is obviously still active. You can see the smoke there, and it's clearly windy. So I don't know how many crews are on this, because at some point, there's only so many crews available. I'm losing track. There's so many of these fires. It's difficult for me to tell the names apart. Okay, here's a new one, probably lightning ignited. This is the granite fire. This is up. Looks like it's... Alright, this is not great. This is moderate to dangerous rate of spread from the Flea Mountain camera. Again, this is likely from a wet thunderstorm, but clearly not wet enough. You can see active flame, and there's some, it looks like there's some single tree torching going on. So clearly there's wind on this fire. It's actually, the wind is pushing this fire down slope, so there's some retrograde, headward motion of this fire. Well, I guess the head is in this direction, but there's some upslope backing motion at the foot of the fire here, the heel of the fire. It looks like it's burning in the trees, so in timber. I can't quite tell. I don't know how up to date this satellite image is, but there's a lot of recent fire history up here. You can see the patchwork of the landscape here. That's logging. So all of these, let's get rid of the. You can see the browner patches of the places that have been more recently logged. This is a large commercial logging plantations, which if you've listened to any of Zeke's broadcasts in recent years, you know how problematic these can be in terms of flammability, given that they have not been managed. Well, they have not been managed either ecologically. With the ecology in mind or with fire resilience in mind. But in any case, this fire is one that I bet is going to make some folks nervous, given where it is. Yeah, this is not that far from the point of origin of the campfire. Now, I want to be really clear about something. We do not have strong, large-scale, offshore downslope winds like we did the day of the campfire. Things are not as dry as they were then either, but I know this is going to be a little bit anxiety-inducing for some folks. I don't know exactly where this is relative to the point of origin of the campfire, but I do believe it's relatively close. You can actually see the sort of the footprint in the landscape of the campfire and other recent fires. You can see the changes in vegetation that have occurred, but there's been a fair bit of regrowth. We know that the origin of the campfire was near Pulga, so this is actually a little bit upslope. So I think this granite fire is actually burning a little bit farther north, where there wasn't as much recent fire history. And as we can see, the fire is moving right to left on camera, so that's roughly east to west. So it is generally moving in this direction. It's small, it's half an acre, but this one bears watching. I know there's folks up there who have a lot of traumatic history with fire in the last decade or so. So I just want to make you aware that there is a lightning fire up here. It's quite a ways from town. In fact, the closest place would probably be Sterling City, which, is actually relatively close. So it's a small town up there on the Skyway Road. Something to keep an eye on. There is a fair bit of forest between you and that. But we do not have large-scale downslope winds. We may have some downslope winds locally right now. In fact, let's go up to the region. So if you're lucky, you might actually get some rain up here. This is sort of that general fire zone. There's some showers. They don't look too heavy right now. And it's going to be a question of whether the light showers versus the gusty outflow winds win out. And there is some additional lightning going on, so there could also be new holdovers. Let's take a look. While I've been speaking, this line of isolated showers suddenly turned into thunderstorms between Wheatland and Yuba City and Gridley, so up the northern Highway 99 corridor. There's lightning getting close to Sacramento again. If you're in Sacramento, look north. You'll see flashing. All right, there it is. There's the boundary collision. It did it. This is sort of what I was waiting to see what was going to happen. Watch what happens here. Watch closely. The outflow came here. The sea breeze came, and along the axis, it's unzipping. We're getting thunderstorms between Yuba City, Wheatland. These might backbuild toward Auburn in the next minute or two. So that's pretty dramatic. Wow. Just an absolutely wild. All right, look at this. Look at that. The Esparto vortex, let's call it. Look at that swirl. I'm gonna pause it and then step through individually. This looks like a hurricane icon. Look at this. Watch this as it spins. That is just kind of wild. So what we got going on here is just this boundary palooza out here. Look at all these outflow boundary up here, a secondary outflow boundary catching up with the sea breeze front. This is the Melta breeze for those in Woodpile. Here is, I don't even know, this is just some micro low. Let's do a really small L. It's just doing this, and normally this is just a slight wind shift with some nice or not so pleasant delta breeze if it's hot. But today, we're getting cyclonic curvature, we're spinning up thunderstorms, we're spinning up boundaries, we're blowing up wildfires, we're doing all the crazy and wild things that boundaries like to do. Collision right over Volcano. There you go. That's always a good place name. Let's take a look what's going on a little bit further south, San Joaquin Valley. So now, that's not good. This brand new fire is already showing up on radar. That's what this is. Bet you I can confirm it's a fire with the correlation coefficient. There we go. Again, CC drop. This is rain. This is apparently a new fire east of Merced. The only good news is that I'm not seeing as much. Well, let's go north again. Check out Sacramento. See if we, so if we go north, we now see a mix. We still see here, you see that correlation coefficient drop. There's still a pretty robust smoke plume in here, sandwiched in between the rain showers and the outflow boundary, which just moved in. You see this feature right here? They're literally converging over the fire zone as we speak. So I'm curious what happens here. If we're lucky, we'll get a nice little downpour over the fire. If we're unlucky, well, a lot of things could happen, so we'll see. It's hard to turn this off tonight. There's a lot of consequential events in terms of fires. There's incredible meteorology unfolding that we rarely see in this part of the world. Let me go check watch duty, because I feel like at this point there's going to be new fires every couple minutes. Let's check on that granite fire. Okay, so that's still doing some torching on the trees, and does not. Oh, there's some rain falling on it, so there you go. There's some water, but the fire is burning through the rain. You can see flames and rain in the same image. That's always something. All right, zooming out. Checking on these starts up here. These are small still. We'll have to see. This one's contained. That's nice. Let's see what happens with some of these other ones here. Let's see what our updates are. 6.5 fire. What's the update? Okay, that's just the 4,000 acre update. Let's check on the Palladino fire. Fires pumping Fairfax Road with new requests for 5 additional engines. Let's take a look at the imagery here. Again, this is that fire down by Bakersfield. It's a grass fire. Looks like it's getting into some brush, and it might even be getting into some structures. It's a little hard to tell. Kern River might be the stopping point for that one. Right along here. Going back down to Southern California, of all places, there's a fire in the Hollywood Hills. Fortunately, not a big wind day down there, but it's, I mean, look at the location there. It's right in the WUI on Sunset Plaza Drive. So this is the Bell Ridge camera. Let's see what it looks like. This is one that I don't think has a lot of potential. This would be a bad start under Santa Ana wind day, that's for sure. Well, this isn't the greatest view. Let's see if we can get around another camera just to see it. There's a lot of cameras. Well, this one should have a good view. Whoa, that one's a little too close. So that's kind of right in the thick of the smoke. It's a little bit too close to get a good view of what's going on in the Hollywood Hills there. Let's look at another more distant camera here. This one might. Again, I don't think, it might be a threat to a few local houses, but this one does not have a lot of room to roam with LA County Fire. Unfortunately, it looks like it could actually be burning a structure right now, actually in the Hollywood Hills, but I don't think this is going to go much beyond the street that it's on now. Again, under current conditions, had this occurred in January, this could have been a catastrophic fire that did something like this right into Hollywood, but fortunately, those are not the conditions we've got right now. So I'll check back in on that if there's significant update. Let's just do a double check on Northwestern California, see what else there might be going on. The Lick Fire update, Root Fire. The fire's holding within retardant lines for now. Could be a problem if outflow winds blow up later, but alright. Alright, let me check the radar again. Still, man, just storm after storm after storm blowing up. And there is still some wild stuff going on in the boundary here. Let me check. I'm gonna bring myself full screen. Look at some of the comments again. All right here. Now, Eric mentioned that swirl of outflow boundaries to the northwest of the Davis radar. I think only part of it's outflow. I think part of it is the delta breeze and other pieces of it. That's actually a good visualization, by the way, of why there is a localized tornado alley in the Sacramento Valley. That's a good indication of how the topographic features can cause vorticity or spin in the lower atmosphere. On a day when there's surface-based thunderstorms, occasionally that means you can get a funnel cloud or a tornado on that part of the state, partly thanks to that very localized, topographically induced spin in the air. Today, that's not likely because we don't have surface-based thunderstorms. These are thunderstorms that are based well above the surface, so it's a lot harder for that very surface-based spin to connect with a cloud that's 10, 15,000 feet up. So a lot of folks mentioning there might be time for the tankers to get like 1 or 2 more drops in, but then the air tankers, the slurry dropping tankers will be done for the night. They don't fly those at night because you can't see what you're doing, and those operate very importantly off of visual flight rules. Some of the air attack, and there's a handful of night flying Nighthawk helicopters that California now has access to. Those will probably continue flying tonight, but it's much limited in scope. That's something like less than 2 or 3% of Cal Fire's air arsenal can fly at night. So it's better than 0, which is what used to be the case, but it is a lot more dangerous to fly at night for the obvious reason of it's dark, and if you're maneuvering close to the topography, which inherently, if you're dropping water or fire retardant from a helicopter or a fixed-wing aircraft, you have to be relatively close to the deck. You're doing so at considerable risk, and at night, the risk just isn't acceptable, ever. At daytime, it can be acceptable. We decide it's acceptable. But even sometimes in daytime, if the wind is too strong and the visibility is too poor, you can't use fixed-wing air support then either. Again, due to maneuverability. Sometimes you can still send the helicopters in because with helicopters you can fly slowly. With an aircraft, there's a minimum speed below which your aircraft is going to stall and you fall out of the sky. So you can only go so slow, which means that you don't have a lot of time to react. You can fly helicopters slowly. There are night vision modalities in some of these night flying helicopters. Air attack can sometimes fly at night because they don't fly as close to the surface. They're not dropping material. They're not dropping retardant or water. So they can stay high enough to be safely above all of the terrain. So even if you can't see exactly where you're flying, if you know where your elevation is, your altitude is, you can be certain that you're not going to crash into a mountain if you're above the tallest mountain, for example. So that's why we don't tend to see nighttime firefighting aircraft activity, except these new Nighthawk helicopters. Occasionally you can see air attack flying after sunset because they're well above the surface. There are some U.S. military converted helicopters, so like the Chinooks, I believe, that can be flown at night in an emergency, and they have been used to evacuate people during the 2020 fires in the middle of the night, I believe, from I think it might have been near Shaver Lake during one of those big fires. But generally speaking, air resources are not something we tend to see as much of at night. Obviously, you can still use ground resources, but you still have the added impediment that it is dark, and you can do firefighting at night, of course, in the dark, but you can't see as well, and you have to be more cautious. And so night is a trade-off for ground crews. Historically, it cooled off at night, the humidity comes up, and the wind goes down on an average night. Tonight, all bets are off. There might be heat bursts, downslope winds, poor humidity recoveries, you name it, you got it, anything can happen, all bets are off. But generally, night is a mixed blessing because you can't fly the aircraft anymore, and you have limited visibility for ground crews, but on the other hand, it cools off at night, usually, and the humidity comes up, so the fire becomes less active. Often, it's safer to approach a fire on foot with a hand crew, when it's moving more slowly, when it's not burning as hot, when there isn't as much wind. But the problem is there's exceptions to all of these generalities, and you have to take those into account. And tonight is exactly the kind of night where a lot of those rules of thumb may not apply, and where it will be dicey operation in some cases. Again, it's unclear how much, if any, structure loss there was in Chinese camp, although there were credible sources reporting some level of structure loss in Chinese camp, which again it's a small community, but it is a permanently inhabited town, so there are people who live there. And it is possible that some of those structures have burned. I don't know what structures, I don't know how many, I don't know the extent of it right now. Marty Walters, who's been listening to the Forest Service over the scanner in Plumas County. Definitely getting stretched thin, but it's great to hear the lookout, sharing observations, incoming cells with lots of lightning. There are folks up in the actual physical fire towers who are reporting all of this, by the way. We can do it virtually too, but sometimes reports on the ground are still super helpful. Yeah, I mean, I like RadarScope. It's a great app. There is a bit of a learning curve if you're not a meteorologist, but it's a really useful tool. I'm not even sponsored by RadarScope, I swear. I just use it all the time on air. And by the way, it's the only weather app I have on my phone. I don't bother with anything else because I don't like any of the other ones, but if you have some meteorology background, RadarScope is a very useful tool to have in your pocket. I find it most useful not just to, by the way, decide whether or not you need an umbrella, but for more safety-related reasons. If there's going to be any lightning around and I'm going to be outdoors, it's actually a really good tool to determine whether or not there actually is cloud-to-ground lightning near where you are. It's very difficult to get that data otherwise, especially in real time. Alright, well, looks like KCRA is unfortunately showing structures burning in Chinese camp, so let me see if I can pull that up. I'm trying to look and see if I can find it from the links here. Okay, so I'm seeing, so I don't think these are live. I'm not showing this because I'm gonna avoid the copyright issues if I can. But yeah, I can see that is pretty definitive confirmation of multiple structures lost. Again, I don't know what multiple means. I'm seeing 3, 4, 5, at least 3, 4, 5. It could potentially be significant. So there definitely have been some structures which look like homes. So these are homes burning, looks like. This is from footage that is no longer live. Alright, so all I can personally confirm is at least half a dozen structures which appear to be homes from that live helicopter footage. I don't know what happened after that, before the live footage cut out. But there is structure loss in Chinese camp, and I didn't see fire crews on the ground, so there were structures burning. I think the fire got ahead of firefighters, at least at one point this evening, and it does look like part of the community burned, unfortunately. So I don't know the other details at this point, but this would be the first multi-structure loss fire in a while on California. I don't know if we've had one since January where multiple homes have burned. So it's been a pretty good run of good catches, but that looks like that stretch has run out now. The SBI lumber mill, I don't know. I don't know. Let me see if there's any update from Watch Duty on this. Well, let me just go through. I know folks can't see right now, so no, there's no update on that particular fire. There's just so many of these fires. The 6-2 fire, there are some evacuations along Don Pedro Lake, although I don't think there's any permanently inhabited structures there. Those might be campgrounds. Those might be personnel. I don't know exactly. I'm just checking on a few additional things, trying to look for new starts. Checking on that granite fire again that was above Paradise. They're getting some retardant drops in, by the way, on the granite fire up above Paradise. So it's still burning despite some rain showers, but they did get a few drops in. So hopefully that's the good news of the evening. Yeah, Mary mentions that the lumber mills tend to have serious sprinkler systems. This is in reference to the SBI lumber mill in or near Chinese camp. The fire did go through the area, so hopefully that was a successful mitigation. I think the last couple times I've been past that lumber mill, they were actively, the sprinklers were actively on. There is a comment that the KCRA live stream at 24 minutes appears to show most of Chinese camp burned. Again, it's difficult often to ascertain that from the air, but 100% certain structures lost and homes lost based on the visuals that I just looked at. So I think beyond that, I think we're just going to have to wait and see, but there is structure loss on that fire. All right, I'm going to bring, some point I'm going to have to cut it off for the evening, but I do want to share some more visuals before I do that. Just checking on the time here. All right. Making sure I'm sharing. Yeah, okay. Let's bring up the last few frames of the evening satellite imagery before it goes away. The Terminator comes. Here's the Terminator. The Terminator is the line at which is the line of progression of sunset. It's currently just past Las Vegas. Here's that line. Man, that line is holding fast in the East Valley. I wouldn't expect much likelihood of thunderstorms too far to the west of that line, but right along this, it continues to blow up. Let's zoom out a little bit. Look at the broader, slightly broader picture. Let's bring up the shortwave infrared satellite just to see. All right, so this does not look so good. All right, so what we've got, there's a lot of fires burning. All I gotta say, here's the one down by Bakersfield. This one has really got quite a footprint now in western Fresno County. That's the salt fire. There's something else that's burning here. I'm not sure what that is, but it's some sort of grass fire. This is the Garnet fire. Again, it's had a huge heat signature for days, and that's continuing. Here's one of the new fires that started when I took my dinner break. Has a large heat signature now. And then here are the cluster of fires up by Chinese camp. And honestly, this heat signature is probably bigger than it looks because it's having to break through a cloud layer up there. So there's a lot of smoke mixed in with the clouds. If I go over to radar, okay, what's going on again? So these boundaries have now collided. Here's what happened. This line is blowing up. So as I mentioned, it would blow up near Auburn. Well, there we go. So now we're getting widespread thunderstorms between Auburn and Chico. Just on and along and east of the Highway 99 corridor. These might be slightly wetter storms, since now we're on the, as I mentioned, we're on the wet side of the outflow boundary, so the outflow boundary is here. So anything to the east of this could at least have some decent wetting rain. So we're probably getting some heavy downpours by Beale Air Force Base, Palermo up by Oroville, but we're also getting dry lightning strikes. And we're also going to have holdover fires. So I would expect at least a couple new fires from this band, even though there are some heavy downpours now. The downpours aren't universal. We're getting strikes outside of the rain cores. Okay, we get some new cells popping up down here by Volcano, Avery. Let's see what's going on here. So there might have been a little bit of rain on the fire down by Chinese camp if we got lucky, maybe a little bit, but not a lot. And that outflow boundary is probably doing numbers on that fire with that wind right now. And we got yet more lightning down here, some more dry strikes east of Highway 99. So let's check on the fire map again here. Let's take a look at some cameras on the map. So these ones are looking at those two new fires. That's not showing much. It's too smoky. This one's looking south of those fires. I think it's too windy. No, it's a decent little view. It's kind of, they're turning the camera around. Probably scanning for new fires. Okay, so this is the fire. This is an indication of how much the rain did. Well, not a tremendous amount because you can still see open flame. So that fire certainly not extinguished by rain in any form. Okay, here's that slightly better view. This is actually a view right now, I believe. Yeah, so this is the fire. So it looks like the forward progression of the fire in Chinese camp is slowed down. Chinese camp is somewhere in there. And unfortunately, I think what we can probably see is some structures burning with those poofs of darker smoke. So unfortunately, the good news is it looks like the forward progression of the fire has slowed. The bad news is it looks like the fire did make it into town here. And they might have even gotten a little bit of rain. But now, look at the wind shift. Wind's coming from camera right to camera left, now pushing this fire in a slightly different direction. So, that's very much a mixed bag. That's kind of a apocalyptic looking sunset. Let's see if there's some other cameras here. Okay, so this one is looking at I don't know if this is probably the 2.8 fire or the 2.2 fire. It could be looking at either of these. But this one is pretty active, and you can see there's now downslope winds pushing this fire back toward the valley. That one's blowing up with this outflow. So, again, this one's going to make a big run in the grass. These might start moving back upslope again soon, though, and that's the problem. So this is that updated fire footprint. Honestly, I do not know how much progression it made into Chinese camp, but clearly some structures were burned based on the live helicopter footage. This is another angle from Sonora Peak on the Chinese campfire, and you can see those poofs of smoke. Again, I do think, unfortunately, those may be structures burning in this fire, even though the forward progression looks to have slowed considerably, possibly thanks to some brief rain shower, but now the winds are really flaring it back up again. So that's quite some imagery as well. Lots of fiery sunset images right now. There's Telegraph Hill. Don't know if the 1-2 fire is still active. Looks like, well, it's doing something. It's not doing a lot, but still skunking around there. We'll see what it does tomorrow. Okay, new fire. Again, this is probably lightning east of Wheatland. This looks like it's in the grass. Let's see if we can find it on camera here. Pretty sunset. The camera's going to pivot to, okay, there's the fire. The fire is moving right toward the camera, so it's moving upslope. This is in grass and maybe oak woodland, so they had a chance to catch it if they can get some air support, but it might be a little harder at night under gusty outflow wind conditions, so yet another lightning fire. I mean, we're well into the dozens now. Okay, another new fire. Man, it just keeps going. Forbstown fire. Quarter-acre fire, both sides of the road. This one looks pretty small, but if it's on both sides of the road, it's probably already spotted across something. And you can see the winds. There's no rain here. Look at the wind. Okay, this one looks like it's picking up a bit of a head of steam. So this one, where is this? This is close to Forbestown, just off of Forbestown Road. Looks like there's a power outage locally. Lightning might have taken the power out. This is in pretty densely forested territory, so again, could be another good stop, but the more ignitions there are, the harder it is to stop all of them. Here's that granite fire up above Paradise, Pulga, Concow. Let's take a look at what it looks like. They got some rain and some retardant drops. It's still burning, and I'm still seeing some torching going on, so hopefully there's some way to manage this tonight, but it's sort of at a bit of a standoff between fire crews and the weather right now there, and I think that might be the theme for a lot of the rest of the night. There's a vegetation fire in Sacramento, but that's only got so far to roam in the city of anyway. Okay, an update on the salt fire. 2,000 acre update, making slope aligned runs. Again, this is in a fairly remote rural part of California, but to the extent that it's going to move up slope, it has a lot of room to roam up toward Mine Mountain. Not a whole lot of recent fire history here, and we're just going to see how that goes. It's probably not going to be prioritized relative to some of the fires burning in the urban interface right now. So that is precisely what we see sometimes, is that resources are allocated to the fires where people live and that are threatening people's homes and structures directly. So, alright, this is officially the last frame. You can see the Terminator moving across central California. There's the line of sunset. There's an orphan anvil down here, near from a thunderstorm in Southern California. Alright, radar once more. Again, here's that big wind shift on the fires, and it may be helping initially with the moister air, but it could cause problems in a little while as those fires blow back up again. Pretty robust line of storms now. Man, it just gets line after it just never ends between Forest Hill and Chico right now. A lot of storms. These are wet thunderstorms, I think. These are not dry, but there are dry strikes, and the landscape is very dry. There could be a lot of holdovers. Here, this is still mostly grass and brush, maybe fewer holdovers there. Once we start getting lightning up in this region, though, and we already did it earlier, but once this round moves a little bit further inland, higher likelihood of holdover fires in the trees, in the forest. Once this line moves up there, we're going to notice more of those overnight and into tomorrow. We probably won't see some of those until the sun rises. So, you might yet see me again live in the morning. There may be more to come. Alright here. Alright, so that Forbestown fire is already threatening structures, which I think you can see because you can see these parcels. It's right across the street from some structures, so it didn't have to run very far. And it is windy, so that's not necessarily ideal news. Where is Forbestown if we go up here? Am I in the right spot? Well, there's potentially some more storms inbound, so it could be helpful, might hurt. But in any case, there's a lot still going on this evening. More fires could start. The risk of truly dry lightning is now decreasing, but the overall likelihood of lightning, by the way, is going to increase tonight. So pretty much anyone in this area could see lightning. And then up into Oregon, and blah, blah, blah. So it won't all be dry, but there will likely be, in this whole region, additional new lightning ignitions in the next 24 hours. Those storms by Oroville now throwing, look at that. Look at these dry bolts. These are outside the storm course. Now, we're getting lucky with the trajectory here. Looks like the showers will move over after the lightning has struck, but it might not be enough. All right, so I think I'm getting close to wrapping it up for the evening. But this has been, just to wrap it up, this morning there were thousands of dry lightning strikes in the Central Valley, San Joaquin and Sacramento valleys, including Sacramento, and there was even a severe downburst wind gust in the eastern Sacramento suburbs that knocked out power to a 5-digit number of people. 70-mile-an-hour wind gusts. Dozens of fires were ignited this morning. Most of them in the grasslands, those were mostly extinguished, but a handful in the foothills, in the brush and the trees. Some of those will end up going on to become much larger fires. Then there was additional dry lightning, more isolated, but in more consequential locations in the foothills, later this afternoon. Some of those fires have gone on to threaten or even destroy structures, and the most substantial structural loss that I'm currently aware of is in Chinese Camp, where it looks like at least minimum of half a dozen homes or larger structures were burned. And there is a significant risk of additional structural loss tonight and into tomorrow with new and existing fires that will likely behave erratically with very unusual combinations of wind gusts, wind directions, temperature inversions, lack of inversions, lack of temperature recovery, and even some rain or lightning at times. So all sorts of crazy weather. I think the Bay Area is likely safe at this point. I think that we narrowly scrape by having a much wider dry lightning event, but I do think the Bay Area is probably out of the woods at this point. Not 100%, but 95 maybe, let's call it. I would expect a bunch of new fires tomorrow as holdovers as some of these wetter lightning strikes pop up. So I would expect maybe not as many fires as today, but perhaps a dozen or 2 dozen new fires again tomorrow, just from what's already happened today, and maybe some additional ones from whatever additional lightning occurs tonight. And I may end up having another pop-up live stream tomorrow. We'll see how it goes. The heat wave is only going to slowly fade. It's still going to be hot and breezy inland, so these won't be great firefighting conditions. They could be worse. They could be better. Pacific Northwest, Western Canada, though, they really couldn't be worse. This is literally the worst heat wave on record in September in that entire region. From east of the Cascades in Washington and then in BC, I don't think any part of the province has really seen September temperatures this hot before, except for the apocalyptic layer of smoke that might keep temperatures down from reaching those records. But the air mass is still very hot and conducive to that fire spread. So, probably see you tomorrow. Stay safe out there tonight. Again, this isn't 2020. We don't have nearly as many lightning ignitions in nearly as many bad locations, in nearly as many WUI adjacent regions, although there are some. But the main difference is that the background dryness is not at the same level as it was in 2020. Remember, that event occurred following record heat during an extremely severe drought, and we don't have an extremely severe drought right now in this part of the state. We also did not have a record warm summer before this. So those are sort of the mitigating factors in this moment, even though it does look like the West Coast is entering a very active wildfire period, and we may not have seen the worst of it yet. So stay safe out there, and probably talk to you tomorrow.